right through this evening, and it's so interesting to see the varied views that are coming within the industry folks as well, which means there is so much more to discuss as we go forward, not just to understand India's own growth, but also to understand how we fall in the global landscape. So let's now move on, ladies and gentlemen. We have many more insightful conversations that we have lined up for you. Now, you would all agree with me, and this is something which I said when I started the show as well. Look at the kind of progress that has already been made. AI has already evolved from a futuristic idea to a powerful driver of change across industries. So today we'll try and explore how India is embracing this revolution and is also its growing role, as I said, in the global AI landscape. And a highlight, ladies and gentlemen, which will happen in the later part of the evening, of course, will be the launch of the AIdea Report 2025, which essentially will provide all of us a comprehensive overview of India's progress in adopting GenAI, which will also showcase our achievements, but also, as I said, will address the key challenges in various sectors, whether it's healthcare, whether it's finance, or whether it's technology. But ladies and gentlemen, let's now shift our focus to the other key conversation that we want to have this evening, which is how GenAI is transforming various industries. So the next panel that we're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very aptly themed. It is called The Role of GenAI in Shaping the Future of Financial Services, Auto, Travel, as well as Technology. We've discussed this earlier, and we discuss this every time we talk about artificial intelligence, which is that the pace of this transformation is just astounding. The panel, ladies and gentlemen, will explore how GenAI is driving efficiency, enhancing customer experience, but most importantly, also fostering innovation across key sector of India's economy, along with, we never forget, the challenges that businesses face and the strategies and solutions to really try and overcome them. I will not like to give everything away. We leave that to our lovely panelists. Do join me in welcoming our moderator and our lovely panelists. Let's give it up for Ritu Singh, the Deputy Editor at CNBC-TV18. She, in fact, will be steering this conversation for all of us. I think we can have a louder round of applause as we welcome Ritu. With a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming a stellar panel. Join me in welcoming Kunal Purohit, the President at Next Gen Services at Tech Mahindra. Good to have you with us. Join me in also welcoming Hari Balaji, Partner Technology Consulting at EY India. Good to have you with us. Rima Jain, CEO at Hero Motorcorp, is also joining us on the panel. Rima, good to have you with us. Dr. Shakti Goyal, Chief Architect and Data Science Head at Yatra Online, also joining the panel. And last but not the least, ladies and gentlemen, Vivek Gupta, President and Head Strategy at Bajaj Allianz Life, is also joining this panel. I think we can have a louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome this stellar panel. Good to have all of you with us. Ritu, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. All right, I think we heard plenty to kickstart, this chat on generative AI, but we're trying to get to more specifics on, and we have representatives from industries across the segment here to understand how, individually, to what extent has generative AI really changed the game? Has it not? Is it hype? Is it reality? Are the use cases enough, or are we far away from actually, unlocking the benefits of that? So with that, let me kick this off with you, Kunal. Since you come from the IT industry at Tech Mahindra, start by telling us about, how your experience with using generative AI has been. How is it different from what you've been doing with AI for the past decade and so? What has worked? What's not really worked for you?
Sure. There's a lot of questions in that one question. You
can choose to answer anyone.
No, we'll answer all of them. So I belong to the tech services industry. So, for us, the life changed across two big factors. First is ability to use generative AI internally within TechM to be able to, do things faster, differently, so that we can provide a significantly better experience for the 150,000 odd employees that we have, right? So within, infusing AI in all walks of TechM to be able to drive TechM faster in the market. The second one, which is also a big one, is the ability to enable our customers use generative AI to become more productive in the work that they do. Over the last few years, we have seen that enterprises have moved from a operating model that was more digital, which was driven by online commerce, building more cloud-centric applications, to now what we call a cognitive operating model, where they are using the power of data and AI to drive productivity enhancements. So we are pivoting the use of generative AI to improve productivity and amplify business outcomes for customers. What helped us significantly over the last 1 year was our ability to focus on few things, because suddenly generative AI, the excitement of new technology. So we said, we'll do only a few things, go deep, and we are very happy kind of in the last 1 year with the progress that we have done. And we call this amalgamation as FORCE AI. So FORCE stands for focus on 4 to 5 industries. So for example, financial services, healthcare, technology. We built agentic AI systems for pharmacovigilance use case in pharma companies to report adverse events differently and in an expedited way compared to what happens today in a very manual and a slow process. Likewise, so F is focused industries, O is, we said AI and generative AI can't be in slivers. It has to be at an organization level. So organization AI at scale. And within TechM, as an example, there are thousands of developers now using the power of generative AI to deliver, to write code, to automate test cases and improve productivity by 25 to 30% overall, right? So that's some of the things that have been.
So that's the headline number for us, 25 to 30% productivity gains, thanks to the use of generative AI alone.
Sure, and it varies, depending on the use cases. If you have pure play testing in a greenfield, you can get up to 60-odd% productivity, right? So, so the power is significantly there, the promise of what can be delivered, and then of course, based on whether it is greenfield, brownfield application, it kind of varies from 20 to 60%. The third is R, which is we felt that because this is still new technology, all of us need to make sure it's based on research and development and not suddenly deploying it immediately. So we experimented at creating our own LLMs. So TechM is the only SI that built 2 LLMs last year. One is for the India segment, where we created something called Indus, that is targeted towards 37 dialects in Hindi. And it's a single short learning model which enables financial services industries, healthcare industries to build their use cases on top of it, right? So the only provider to kind of have built that. C is COEs. We felt that to scale it across the organization, we should be able to start with a COE and then, deliver multiple rather than, having a no approach to scaling it out. And we kind of built this for quite a few customers across the focused industries. And E is education. We are in the business of having people who are right skilled on, generative AI and other emerging tech. So across FORCE, we were able to kind of deliver a significant impact internally and for our customers.
We'll get to some of those specifics in just a bit, because skilling is an important aspect of adoption of generative AI. But Rima, let me throw it across to you. We got a number from him, 25 to 30% productivity gains for Tech Mahindra. He said it could go up to 60% in the automotive space for you at Hero MotoCorp. What have you seen so far from your own experience using generative AI? What's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, and how, to what extent are you using this across, the larger strategy down to the shop floor?
All right. So Ritu, first of all, very excited to be here. What we're seeing right now in the AI space or a generative AI space is really the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to be done. Most of the industry, there are solutions we have built in GenAI. One of the areas where industry as well as us, Hero MotoCorp, which we have been really successful is, and picking on the skilling piece, is really democratizing the excellence, right? And what I mean by democratizing excellence, through GenAI, there are a lot of solutions we are building in order to build that knowledge in the ecosystem. Let me just give a few examples. So, one of the big challenge for us is our dealer ecosystem, right? Where we have a dealer sales executive really pitching out to the customer solutions. And what is happening is that ecosystem, we are around 2,000 touch points, and every touch point has 9 to 10 sales executive. And that segment, there is a lot of churn. Every other month you see a different sales executive really coming in. And to build the knowledge in them is very, very important. It's a very high, I would say, from a cost perspective, quite a big challenge for us. There, what we've been able to do is through GenAI, we've been able to help them with a customer's sales pitch, custom sales pitch based on the customer persona. So Ritu, as you walk into the store and you are coming in, you're a biker profile, you're a social media enthusiast, the salesperson based on your persona is going to pitch you, right? How is it going to elevate your profile? If you're walking in the family, it will pitch you the features for the bike, which is better for the family, right? So I think that is one area where we've seen, without a generative AI, it would have taken us, years to do. Sure. But we are able to do that within weeks.
Have you implemented this kind of hyper-personalization across your stores? And if so, the success rate of your sales pitches, to what extent have they gone up? Are you sure to make a sale, given all the insights that you have, thanks to the technology you're using?
So what we're seeing is, wherever we have implemented, we're in the process of driving the adoption. But we can easily see that we can see the conversion rates have improved a lot. 4 to 5% is the improvement in the overall conversion rate.
Okay.
So and the other one in the, again on the excellence piece, is now we are a company, we're a 40 years old company. There's a lot of enterprise knowledge which is sitting in the company, right? Especially in the research and development. There's a marketing team, there's a quality team, there's a market research team, there's multiple teams really working through and getting all these knowledge. Now through generative AI, we're able to get all that knowledge together and then able to give insights to our engineers in order to implement that knowledge so that they don't make the mistakes which has been made in the past. And that's the first phase. There is something little bit technical term, semantic search capability, which we have built on top, which could understand the user language. You don't have to use a specific keyword. If somebody calls vibration for a bike or somebody calls noise, it is able to distinguish between what is that and then able to provide a better recommendation to the engineers. And the power is, as this gets matured, you will be able to do rapid prototyping. You're able to improve your innovation cycle much faster, right? And I could really think 25 to 30% and much more is what is going to improve our overall innovation cycles, really.
Vivek, what's been your experience as a financial services player? One would think you would have tremendous use for GenAI, but going beyond just fraud detection or, sort of getting customer insights, to what extent have you found success? Is there measurable ROI you see on the use of GenAI?
I'll start with something where we see as consumers, we have used GenAI much before than we as an enterprise. So when we started doing this for the enterprise, we ensured that our senior management and our key personals are trained on GenAI. So that's how we started on it. And broadly, when we started on it, the use cases were in 3 areas. It was content generation, summarization, or translations. And in that, something which my colleague just mentioned, we also created a similar tool called Smart Pitch, where basis the customer's persona, we are able to generate different content and pitches for a sales team to talk about it. And if I have to quote a number, if you would have done linearly in a normal AI model, we would have had to do 55 lakh permutation combinations for that. That's the number amount of pitches we will have to create. But with GenAI, we did it much faster. But because the tool has just got launched, it's too early to talk about numbers. But it is, in the initial signs are pretty encouraging. Because when a consumer, a salesperson is talking to a consumer, he or she is able to understand the consumers better and explain to the customer basis his or her need. And that is what is yielding us results in that.
So that is the sales aspect of it. When you're verifying claims, whether to accept them, reject them, are you using generative AI already? Can the machine make a decision for you whether to accept or reject a claim?
So there are 2 parts of insurance. There is a general insurance and there is a life insurance. Life insurance, thankfully, there are less number of claims which is there, which is not exactly during the COVID period, but now it's pretty less. We have not reached a stage where GenAI will completely decision a claim, but it can always provide summaries. It can always provide intelligent inputs to the claimant, to a claim processor to take a decision. That is what is happening currently in life insurance. Excuse me. In general insurance, yes, it is reaching a stage where, basis the images of maybe the car damage, it can, through a traditional AI system, can provide inputs and additional claims. In fact, you can, I'm sure people would have experience from Bajaj in general as well, and through other insurers, where claims are settled within maybe few minutes, basis this technology.
Okay, well, Dr. Shakti, what are you seeing at Yatra? One would think, the first obvious case of using GenAI is probably chatbots. If a customer wants to log into the website and say, hey, I want to travel in this month, suggest some places, you could do some hyper-personalization, like many of the panelists have been talking about. But beyond that, are you able to layer generative AI on top of the systems that you've built? Or, do you think we're far away from really reaping the benefit of generative AI so far?
Sure, Ritu, thanks for the question, and thanks to E&Y for having me here. So at Yatra, we are very heavy into GenAI, and actually we started using GenAI almost a year ago to build applications and embedding GenAI as part of the design of the application itself. So I'll give you an example that we have developed an expense management solution where corporate travelers, they can report their expenses and they get reimbursed. Now, a lot of companies want to know that if it's a meal expense, was any alcohol consumed in it? Yeah. And how do you figure that out? And you can have a lot of international travel. There can be hundreds of thousands of brands of alcohol, right? It's impossible to have a repository of like all these brands. So, so here we are using two aspects of GenAI, the semantic capabilities and the vast amount of knowledge that it's trained on. Okay, so we submit an expense receipt to GenAI. It uses the vision analytics capability. So instead of using OCR, the optical character recognition, which is an older algorithm, we use the vision abilities of GenAI to identify what kind of a receipt it is. Then it says, okay, it's a meal receipt. Then it reads all the line items from it. Let's say it reads a line item called a bucket of gods. What is that, right? Actually, it's a type of a local alcohol in a European country, okay? If it reads superior, what is superior? Superior can be a room type, right? But superior in context of a meal is alcohol, right? GenAI is able to do all this work for you. It is able to do that. I submit a receipt. Within 12 seconds, it is able to answer a lot of questions. What kind of a receipt it is? If it's a meal receipt, is there any alcohol in it? And what are the other parameters that I need from the receipt? That has been a huge win for us. The other thing is that within this solution itself, right, the expense solution, we have something called a chatbot, but it's not a rules-driven chatbot. It is GenAI-driven chatbot. And we have speech-enabled it, right? So you can talk to it in like more than 100 languages, like whatever GenAI supports, or you can write in more than 100 scripts, right? You can even write in kanji or like katanga, which are the Japanese scripts, like one of the toughest scripts to read. Now, you can ask a question that, what were my expenses last month? Give me a list of expense amounts by expense categories for last 10 days. And the person can be like having his breakfast and at the same time ask that question. That information will appear on the screen. I don't have to go and click here and there to figure out that information or like run a report. That is another thing. And there's a third example here. Please
go on. Do give us this third example. So we're more careful when we submit our bills to our companies.
Yeah, and then there's a third example which actually uses a lot of abilities of GenAI, its semantic capabilities, knowledge, and the agentic part of it. What is agentic AI? It has just come out by Google, but OpenAI already had it a year ago. What agentic AI does is, based on what you're asking, you can make the LLM or the GenAI to perform the task for you. And the task is calling a piece of software called API, Application Programming Interface. So for example, a lot of our corporate customers would say they want information on the international travel. They say, I want to go to Boston from Delhi. What are my options? I want to take an evening flight or that. Or it can come in very broken English. It will say, I want to go from Delhi to Lucknow, Wapsi 2 din baad, right? And then I say this state. The Gen AI models, LLMs, we have trained them so that they understand everything, all of this, and they're able to extract the relevant information like the origin, departure, date of departure, number of passengers, the class of travel. So these are 5-6 parameters. Then the agentic AI part comes into play. We call the search API, pass in all this information, it gets the information out of it, generates an email, and then sends it out. How does it help us? We have around like 800 to 1,000 large customers. They send us a lot of emails.
Yeah.
Just imagine the load on customer support. It sometimes takes them 2 to 3 hours even to attend that email. Then it takes an additional 30 to 40 minutes to respond to it.
Yeah.
This actually responds, the response goes out in 2 to 5 minutes. And then I don't need to hire more people, as I add more customers. Right? I
For
don't need to have more
repetitive
people.
tasks. Yes. Well, Hari, you've been patiently listening to everyone talk about how great the use of generative AI has been and the kind of gains they've seen, the number of man hours they've been able to reduce. But burst that myth for us, because you've done a study across thousands of corporates to understand what the real rate of adoption really is. Are they all as gung-ho as the rest of our panelists here?
So this panel has been in some way a microcosm of the survey that we have done, right? And what I find really interesting is that right from the start, you've been pushing people for numbers, and you've gotten back anecdotes, right? Yeah. And if I look at the survey, I think
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I'll just step back and talk a little bit about the survey, right? So I think we've, across the world, I mean, if you've talked to other CXOs in the market, everyone has interesting POCs that they've undertaken. Everyone's seen the potential of GenAI. People have tried out very interesting things, and they've all worked inside sandboxes. But as our survey reveals, and I won't spoil it too much because we have a session later where we're launching, only about 15% of CXOs that we surveyed told us that they had GenAI workloads in production. Right? And further, only about half of them, about 8% of the total population, was able to correctly estimate and attribute the cost of GenAI and therefore able to come back with an ROI number. Right? And frankly, I think that has been the challenge, or that's the challenge of the moment, where I think everyone sees the potential. We are 2 years out from when ChatGPT sort of exploded, and sort of GenAI became, occupied everyone's mind space. We've tried a lot of different experiments, but we've not seen the level of adoption that we expected to happen. Now, why is that, right? Yeah. That's the next question. So I think
my question rather was if you could
Yeah.
give us more details on this 15%. What are the industries that have been quicker to adopt GenAI? Which are the ones that have been struggling with it, and
Yeah.
why?
Yeah, no, completely. So I think the industries that have adopted GenAI are fairly represented here, right? So I think technology, financial services, and to a certain extent, I would say healthcare are the ones that are leading the pack.
You missed auto and travel.
Yeah, and following that is possibly, retail, e-commerce, etc. And I'd sort of put Yatra in that bucket and auto, right? So I think that we've got a very fair and good representation of the industries and sectors which have been sort of the aggressors when it comes to adopting generative AI, right? And that's also because if you sort of step back and think about the use cases, right? We've all heard of coding co-pilots. I think that's the sort of the standout use case which has been there from even before you had a big ChatGPT launch. People were trying to use co-pilots or use AI, GPT in some form for coding. And then you have the customization, the mass hyper-personalization, marketing, sales enablement, customer support. These are all, I think, the most obvious use cases that we've come across. And then I'm sure, we've seen use cases where we are looking at, let's say, credit assessment memos or like insurance and banking and financial services use cases. So I think the use cases which were very obvious and clear right from the beginning, I think those have all seen a great deal of adoption today. Where we are at this point is sort of then going beyond those low-hanging, obvious use cases. So for example, I'm sure Rima in auto has some very interesting Industry 4.0 use cases she's probably experimenting with, which are still sort of in their early days. And I think we'll see all of these sort of mature and come into fruition over the next coming year or two.
Okay, Rima, since you brought that up, let me ask you then, what are these interesting innovations that the automotive industry is working on, which could not have been done without generative AI? Connected vehicles, for instance, that's been a big buzzword, a talking point. To what extent is GenAI enabling you to do that?
So Ritu, what I'll do is I'll just zoom out a little bit, and then get into connected vehicles. So see, what is happening with, GenAI, that its ability to give you recommendation on its own and give you innovative solutions as well, right? So that's a big differentiation between a traditional AI and GenAI. And in any of the industry, if you see, there is a role which is there's a corporate office role. Just taking that, right now. One of the key role for the corporate office or people work in the corporate office is really getting the data right, getting the information right, driving insights, after getting the data, getting the insights right. Then from the insight, you're able to then do a, recommendation and the foresight. That's a lot of us, at a corporate does it. 70% of our time, get there, right? Now through GenAI, right, if you get your data right, all this will just happen in seconds, right? It will not even take, hours and hours for decision making. What will happen is, as long as you have the data, it will give you insight, it will give you foresight, and then from the foresight, you can then, go to the implementation directly, right? Which means we will spend more time in solutioning rather than, analytics, rather than getting root cause, rather than information collection, right? It will give you options that, you have so-and-so problem. These are the 5-6 solutions you can really try, and then you pick and choose and you work on the solutioning rather than that. So I think a lot of us, our jobs are going to change a lot. We all should learn how to use tech. And then most of our time should really go in solutions. So that's one big change which I see. Again, coming to connected vehicles, we see what Tesla is doing, right? The entire autonomous vehicle is all built on AI engine. So a lot of it, as the data starts coming in from the connected vehicle, there are a lot of new features and the capability will get enabled. For example, safety alert. Knowing the data and giving an alert to the user in terms of what are the safety hazards, what road, what is happening. So be more careful.
We know of all this because we read about this from Tesla and countries in the West, but how far away are we in India from adopting these technologies to actually get these outcomes?
So at least I can talk about Hero. At least on the connected vehicle side, we are at a right track. What we are really doing is the first groundwork, right? One of the biggest failure point of any GenAI experimentation or AI is not being able to think architecturally right, which means you're not building, you are just building a fancy car, but you are forgetting about the roads, right? That is where most of the companies are struggling. Everyone wants to have that fancy car, which is more glamorous. Nobody wants to do a lot more unglamorous work, which is about data collecting, data cleansing, data pipelining. Nobody wants to do that. Everyone wants to do that glamorous work. What we are right now doing in the connected vehicle, we are building that pipeline. We are trying to build that ecosystem to get the connected, data. And then there are some basic use cases we have cracked. Have we done all of it? Not right now, but things like rider safety assistance, rider behavior and all that we'll be able to crack. But there's a lot more for us to unlock. Yeah. But the building blocks have been put in place in order to get there. So fancy car is going to come. Right now, the road, the engine, all that is there in order to get there. Yeah?
Well, I think one of the biggest building blocks or rather enabler that we want, and it's something all of you kind of touched upon, is skilling. You need the workforce to be able to use the technology to harness its benefits. And, perhaps, you could all start by telling us about what you're doing on that front. How is your hiring pattern itself changed to ensure that you have the right skills to use the technology?
Sure. I think there are a few significant shifts happening because we have to get all the talent available to do some breakthrough work that, esteemed panelists spoke of. So number one, everyone, for example, at TechM is now en masse getting trained on generative AI. Traditionally, we have seen that there are boundaries of SBUs. You have infrastructure team that looks at infrastructure and cloud. You have applications team that, train themselves on Java and other technologies. You've got business process teams that looks at business processes. This is now infusing across the organization, right? So everybody en masse, and we have created a 4-tier AI proficiency index, our own framework, which many of our customers incidentally are adopting to get people trained at different levels from simple foundational elements of automation to getting into AI, to generative AI, and being able to champion the cause for generative AI rollout across the organization, which is a top tier, which is black belt as we call it. Very few people
black
have
belt,
been.
that's
Yeah,
the top
so
tier.
white, yellow, brown, and black. And
very karate inspired.
So we said that the folks, the engineer should also find their career progression. They must know if they get into AI and generative AI, how is their career progressing. So therefore, the tiered approach not just helped us understand the deeper aspects of and roll out the deeper aspects of training and upskilling for customers, but also for individuals who is a a participant and an employee, a truth seeker in generative AI can find career progression. So that is one that we did. Second is there is also a tremendous amount of need for going deep tech into this, right? So therefore, we have significantly increased our efforts into getting PhDs, right? So, which is perhaps first time that we have seen the amount of infusion of PhDs into each of these, where we are looking at research and development driven effort to say, hey, what is coming in the next 6 to 9 to 12 months, 1 year, transition from traditional AI to generative AI to quantum. There are some of these things happening, and there is need for customers to also understand these whole questions of open source versus proprietary and the work around it. So there is a section where we said, hey, we need to go very, very deep in it, and we kind of enhanced our efforts on getting PhDs involved. So there are these, and then third, and for this is for the existing, and third is as we go into universities, we got to upgraded our program to say, can we start to participate in the course itself, right? So for many universities where some of the subject matter experts from TechM are starting to now carry out the course curriculum for the university and college, so that they also understand the applicability of technology and not just the theoretical insight and things like that. So some of the real world evidence, some of the challenges that they spoke of, data and APIs not being, all of those things also need to get assimilated. Otherwise, the pure theoretical certification doesn't necessarily create impact, right? So these 3 or 4 things we are kind of doing to ramp up our efforts on skilling.
Okay, Dr. Shakti, what's been your own approach to hiring at your organization? Are you able to find the right black belts out there? Or, like Kunal was saying, a lot of it is only in theory, perhaps in practice it's much harder to upskill. Are you going to different colleges to look for different kind of talent completely? What's been your approach?
So my approach has been a little different than what we are having at TechM. We are not training any large language models. If you want to train a large language models, you need to understand how the transformer architecture works, what is autoencoder, what is decoder, what is attention head, like a lot of things you have to know. For that, you need someone who is skilled in this area, right? I mean, a person probably who has done a PhD in this area would be more apt. What we do is we try to build solutions using existing GenAI models using the RAG technology. What is RAG is? Regenerative Augmented GenAI. One way to build applications is not to train GenAI, but let GenAI query your data, right? And then it will return the response rate. So what kind of people do I need? I don't need a machine learning engineer. I don't need a data scientist. I don't even need a comm scientist, comm science person. I need someone who knows Python. I need someone who knows R or like Node.js, and you will find them in plenty. So all the solutions that I had mentioned, these are real life production solutions. They were developed by a fresher, right out of college, who worked with me for 1 to 1.5 years, and we were able to develop 3 to 4 solutions like this. No deep talent needed. This is now becoming a commodity skill. You just need to teach the person how to access GenAI, how to use APIs, what are the different methods, what is agentic AI, and that's it. And there's so many videos, tutorials out there.
If it really is going to become that commoditized, Vivek, perhaps, what will be the differentiator for companies then?
First of all, on a lighter note, if I get a CV now with a black belt in GenAI, I'll believe that CV. I'll not disbelieve it. But on a serious note, yes, I agree with Shakti to a certain extent that it will become commoditized for the companies which are not exactly a techie companies, which are implementing the solutions. But for companies which are providing solutions, like in this case, Tech Mahindra we are discussing, they will have to build models according to that. So what we are doing here in Bajaj Allianz is that there are 2 or 3 individuals which know this in and out, and know how the large language model works and how the coding works, how the prompting is there, all those things, they understand that in and out. But their main task is not to build a model. Their main task is to educate and explain to the other members, and then create the use cases like Shakti just mentioned about it, and then launch those use cases within the organization. That's how we are progressing on that.
All right, we have limited time, so let me quickly switch tracks. And Vivek, this question is to you again, because especially in financial services, with the amount of data that you deal with, and data really is the fuel for training, your models, whether you're building the LLM or not. How do you approach data privacy, ethical use of AI, and bring that in the context of what we're seeing in terms of evolving laws, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which has come into force. The rules will hopefully soon be notified. How does all of that tie in? How are you approaching it?
So, since the time we have started implementing GenAI, it's a little different from your traditional AI systems, because there you used to only do the structured data. Here we do the unstructured data as well. And in unstructured, it could be emails, your voice, your videos, all those get implemented as well while giving the output to the customer or to a salesperson. Now, this could be very complex because you could be breaching your data privacy rules as well. So what we have done is we have created an observatory layer on top of all our GenAI solutions. There are two kinds of GenAI solutions we are implementing, and Shakti just touched upon that. One is where it's standalone. It's not connected to any asset, and second is an integrated one. Standalone is separate from our database. There is no connection to our database, hence it's completely private, secure. With regards to the integrated one, where it's on top of our digital asset, we have this observatory layer is helping us know where the data and what kind of data is being used and sent across. So that is how we are progressing on that.
All right, Hari, quickly, because you've been speaking to players from across the industries, how big a concern is data privacy, adopting to the new laws that do come in? What is the sort of feedback that you've been getting?
Yeah, so I think, it's been well covered, but I'll just sort of quickly give two different points of view. I think there's one part of one fear or one concern, which is largely around, if I am sending my data to an LLM, then is that sort of safe? And can there be data leakages? Is that a security risk? I think that's one thing which definitely people are concerned about addressing. And the second thing is essentially DPDP and sort of all the prevailing laws and regulations, and sort of if they're aligned to it. I think broadly, these are the two, I would say, sector agnostic concerns. Then beyond that, you have healthcare and financial services and so on and so forth, where data sensitivity is even higher. And therefore, there is sort of the thoughts around, should they have a local model? Should they even rely on the cloud for all of this data and for LLM use? So I think those are sort of the key themes.
All right, let me quickly get closing comments from all of you then. Reema, perhaps as someone who's using GenAI and is starting to see the benefits of it, is there a misconception you'd like to clear for businesses out there that are looking to adopt GenAI?
So, a couple of things. One, again, going back to Hari as well as Shakti, I think the benefits of GenAI really outweigh some of the risks which were there, right? A lot of companies are a little bit worried about, the data privacy piece. But if you architect it well, if you design it well and don't see that risk, you can have your enterprise level AI model, you can contain the data. So I think benefits really, really outweigh the risk. Second piece, which I would say, and which don't jump into the AI bandwagon without even thinking about your data pipelining, right? So think about getting your data right, getting it, especially on the enterprise data layer should be perfectly done before you start getting into the AI bandwagon. That's the second thing. Third piece I would say is there's a lot of opportunities out there, especially I know, Shakti spoke about agentic AI. What's going to happen really is what I see in the overall evolution which will happen is through generative AI, through AI, now through agentic AI, what is going to happen is a lot of our tasks will get totally automated, autonomous. The AI engine will take an autonomous decision and also implement within a certain framework, right? So that's going to change a lot of what is happening, right? For example, what I see tomorrow happening is, the entire sales and marketing, the entire call center getting replaced, right? So, it is able to, the call center, the AI, agentic AI, the agent is able to qualify your lead, able to send the targeting marketing campaign to your potential customer and ultimately, get you to buy.
Okay.
Similarly, there are multiple such use cases which is going to happen. I think we have to get the framework right, and there are a lot of possibility really to, for AI to unlock.
Okay, in that case, Kunal, what is the one skill, that professionals in the future will really need to thrive in the age of generative AI, you think?
I think it's a mix of, we are moving towards a world where there are a couple of skills which have to be combined. One is the ability to understand the technology side of generative AI, and we spoke a lot of jargon in the last half an hour, but also the ability to culturally manage it, right? Because there are many enterprises today, and for example, I support 400 plus companies, 399 of them are going through a GenAI uplift. The 400th is going through chapter 11, so obviously there is a different priority. But many of these organizations are slow to adapt, not just because of some of these data privacy issues, but also cultural aspect of, should I get involved? Where do I start? Will it lead to job losses? What happens to my team? All of this is also, so therefore the skill will have to be proactive obsolescence based, thinking that I must kill the existing way of doing business, reimagine the way it can work in the new world, keep the customer at the center of it, whoever, it could be an internal customer, external customer, and then build the technology around it, right? So that's very, very crucial to bring these two abilities, the cultural aspect, the mindset aspect, and then the, emerging.
So the mindset aspect and the flexibility to kill a bad idea, to work on the new one. Vivek, quickly, what do you think is the one big skill that professionals in future will need if they want to thrive in this era?
I think from a skill point of view, what we currently do is what we'll require in future. That is imagination. For any team to succeed, you require imagination. Same you require in GenAI. And just to take that point which Rima was mentioning forward, in that, in this imagination, you'll require the right amount of use cases. You can't just jump into a GenAI just for the sake of everyone doing, like the 400 company which Kunal is mentioning should not jump in just because 399
Get
are
your
doing
finances right first. Okay, Dr. Shakti, quickly, what is the one use case you're most excited about using GenAI, whether that exists now or you hope to see in future?
Sure. So one thing that I was really excited about, and it just made my day when the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for 2024 was given to a GenAI solution. So basically, AlphaFold series of models, they use the same architecture that a GenAI uses, and it can be considered as super AI because AlphaFold model series are GenAI models. They are large language models, but specifically for proteins only, right? If you ask it to write a poem, it won't do that. But if you ask it to predict the structure of a protein, it will do that for you. Now how is it going to help? It should help in the cancer treatment. How? How is cancer found? Because there's something goes wrong in the body and wrong proteins start getting created. Can you design proteins using GenAI and AlphaFold models to bind against these cancerous proteins and spread the growth of cancer? That is the ultimate outcome, and this is what the Nobel Committee had seen. Chemists have identified the structures of 175,000 proteins via experiments, but this thing alone has predicted the structure of 200 million proteins. It would have taken eons, to come up with that structure.
Well, that is certainly an area we want to see a lot of innovation in. But Hari, you have the last word. You started with saying only 15% if, the people you surveyed are adopting GenAI. Next 2 years or so,
actually,
what do you think the number will be?
I'll just cut you and I'll just make a very interesting observation, right? And I think it's important. You asked a question on skilling, and I think the way Kunal responded to it and the way Dr. Shakti responded to it were in very different veins, right? So I think this is actually one of the things that we've observed as well, which is that people see the GenAI talent problem as, do I have people who can build GenAI for me? And frankly, the answer to that is that, amongst all the people we've surveyed, only 3% feel that they have the internal in-house talent. So I think that's one problem, and that's a very unique problem. On the other hand, I think the larger issue is sort of if I have an existing, bench of, let's call it 10,000, 100,000, how many employees? How are all of their lives going to change because of GenAI? That is a different skilling problem.
Yeah.
And I think that merits its own attention.
Yeah.
And if you stick around later today, we're launching our jobs report, and you will hear a lot about what we've done on that. So I'm just going to quickly...
So the question was, how do you think that 15% number will move from here on? Is the adoption going to be exponential? Because we've only seen the first
certainly hope so. I certainly hope so for all of our sakes. But I think it's also an exciting time, and I think there's a lot of potential for GenAI, and it would be a shame if that number then didn't quickly creep up to a 50% from a 15. Yeah.
Well, amen to that. On that note, Hari, Reema, Vivek, Dr. Shakti, Kunal, all of you, thank you so much for candidly answering all of our questions, and thanks to all of you for being a very wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu. Can I request all our panelists to stay on stage with us? I'll first request a louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. That was fascinating, insightful, so much data for all of us to absorb. If I could request Ritu and our panelists to come together so that we could get a better group picture with everyone, please. Thank you. I'll also request Ritu and our panelists to stay on with us. Ritu, I'll request you to offer a small token of appreciation to our lovely panelists, please. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you to our lovely panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you. You being such a lovely audience so far. We'll try and make it far more interactive and inclusive as we go on, because as we said, there is just so much for all of us to absorb, discuss, and of course, take forward, and for this to be a starting point of conversation to understand where we stand in India as far as our own AI journey is concerned, but most importantly, how do we stand vis-a-vis our global peers and competition as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now move on. As we said, there is a lot more in store for you as we proceed right through the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to now see is something very special for each one of us. We're now going to move to a fireside conversation with one of India's foremost thought leaders on artificial intelligence, but most importantly, economic development as well. We'll all try to come together to try and explore the steps India must take to integrate AI across various sectors, most importantly, try and understand the role of government policy, and also how India can ensure that AI revolution will benefit all segments of society. The discussion, ladies and gentlemen, will also focus on India's competitive edge in artificial intelligence and the future of the country's digital ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, with a thunderous round of applause, join me in welcoming Mr. Suman Berry, Vice Chairperson of the Niti Aayog. Joining him, we have Shireen Bhan, Managing Editor, CNBC-TV18, who in fact will be moderating this conversation. What will it take for India to unlock the full potential of AI and most importantly, drive its transformation into a global AI leader? We could have a louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome our lovely guest. Shireen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Ridhima. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolute pleasure it is to be here at the CNBC-TV18 EY AI Forward Conclave as we talk about the roadmap for AI adoption in the country. I thought there were fascinating anecdotes that we got from the previous panel on what exactly is going on within different sectors, within different organizations in the use of AI and perhaps also using AI to prevent misuse, and that expense invoice business was fascinating to listen into. But, we are here to talk about the adoption of AI, not just across corporate India, but also as far as the government is concerned, and more importantly, to understand how the government views the adoption of AI to address some of the large access deficits that continue to exist. So it is great to have with us Dr. Suman Berry here at the AI Conclave. Thank you very much, Dr. Berry, for joining us here this evening. It's a pleasure always to have you. Let me start by talking to you about Niti's point of view, because Niti Aayog in many ways is the brains trust of the government. It's just turned 10. It's been a decade of existence. So in many ways, it's the startup within government, Dr. Berry. Explain to me how you look at AI, how you look at the role and relevance of AI from the government's point of view.
Shireen, it's always a pleasure to share a platform with you because you're fair but very demanding. And let me also say, even though we've been sparring partners many a time that please make sure that my answers don't go on too long because
I will try my best, sir.
okay. And I must say, I certainly feel like what in America they call a suit after seeing the last panel, everybody with open neck shirts, and but that goes with the job. How does NITI see AI? Let me just, for the sake of the audience, remind people that I'm the vice chairman. The chairman is the Honorable Prime Minister. Niti Aayog inhabits the same building as the Planning Commission, but Prime Minister Modi, in bringing it into existence from the Red Fort on in his first speech, wanted it to be a very different institution. And in particular, he didn't want it to be engaged in financial allocation to the states. The states remain important, but not because of the money. Okay, so our concern now is most of all is development, but also to try and bridge across silos in government. Now, I want to put AI as a general purpose technology in the same category as silicon, okay? The whole digital transformation. And I want to remind all of us that actually India's journey with silicon in public service was quite slow. I mean, the capacity really began in government, or in the private sector with Y2K, 2000. To begin with, and of course the firms that pioneered Y2K existed before that, but to begin with, they were only outward focused, okay? I think it was the iconic TCS contract for
the passports.
That made, as it were, government or the companies as well as government aware that this was a technology that could be used to improve people's lives. Now, I just want to say that from whenever that was, 2005, 2006, to where we got with India Stack and this, that, and the other, was a 15-year journey. Okay, so I think, and research also indicates that technologies like this are disruptive and may take time to generate all their productivity. Having said that, I would say that the experience of the last decade, certainly the decade of the Modi government, which coincides with the decade of Niti Aayog, has put a lot of building blocks in place, particularly in two respects. The interface between government and the tech sector, exemplified by the India Stack, and by states really getting with the program and appreciating that technology can help them in service delivery. And that's important because, as the Prime Minister says, India grows when states grow. And most of the service delivery is at the level of the states. So there's a question of, as it were, thinking of the use cases, and then there's the question of deploying them at the cutting edge.
No, you're absolutely right in pointing out that it is a journey and it's not a sprint, and it is something that we will have to experiment with. It's something that we will have to adopt at scale to be able to bridge some of the large challenges that we just spoke of. But specific to what is happening at NITI, and you just got Debjani Ghosh, formerly Intel, and then NASSCOM coming on board to NITI to sort of build out what the aspiration or the hope is on frontier tech. What do you hope to do with that? What is the plan? What's the vision?
Well, firstly, that frontier tech is more than just AI, and there is an AI mission. But frontier tech is not only looking at AI, although AI will power a lot of it, but also, for example, the huge changes that are taking place in the biosciences, the life sciences, etc. And I think it's a maxim in the business of employing consultants, which is that if you don't have in-house capacity, you can't get the most out of them. And so I think this is primarily to have somebody knowledgeable who can track what's going on in the universe. And, you know, everything in life, including being an economist, is about network. So while there are deliverables and important deliverables, and I'll get to those, this is also about bringing a whole ecosystem into Niti.
Government, yeah.
Well, into Niti. I mean, because we have had our links with, you know, DRDO, Principal Scientific Advisor, but the running in all of this is happening in Hyderabad, it's happening in Bangalore, etc. And to make the links between the needs of government and what is happening at the frontier on use cases is important. I'm drawing the distinction between use cases and research for a reason. We are going to be in Niti more involved with the use cases, leaving it up to the principal scientific advisor
To focus on the research.
to focus on the research. And if I may, I just wanted to say that this is a very fast-moving field, and of course government has moved fast as well. But, you know, was it 18 months ago, Jensen Huang was here saying that, look, this is a very high-stakes kind of business. You know, don't play in this casino, was what he was saying. But then India went ahead to make at least compute available as a public resource, which is a commitment to two things. One is we want to be at the frontier, but second, that the nature of the technology, and Nadella said this when he was here the other day, the nature of the technology is still nascent.
Yes.
Okay? And at the end of the day, you can throw a lot at computers, sort of brute computing, but it's as much a question of smart algorithms. And there's no reason why we should be shy or sheepish about that.
No, and I think it would be wrong to actually stay out of the race altogether at this point in time. But I want to address two issues with you. One, I want you to put on the economist hat and talk to us about your take as far as the productivity uplift itself is concerned. We just heard from a whole host of panelists talking across different sectors on what they've been able to do. And of course, adoption is still very, very low in India, just about 15%, which is what the EY report suggests at this point in time. But what do you see as the productivity uplift? Do you believe that in the near term, I'm talking about even the next 5 years, is it going to be a game changer globally as well as for India?
What I can share is that PM believes that in the journey to Viksit Bharat, technology and particularly AI is a huge tailwind and not a headwind. So I'll start from that, okay? Now, the second point that I'd make as an economist, which is what you asked me to be, is that economists draw a distinction between partial equilibrium and general equilibrium, okay? Now, you may well get productivity spin-offs in a sector as a result of AI, but productivity at an economy-wide level is conditioned by many other things.
Correct.
And actually, it turns out what is very important is, yes, technology, but also just management, okay? So to argue, as some people do, that simply because of the productivity boost coming from AI, we can expect an extra 1% growth a year.
GDP, no.
No. Well, I'm not saying it won't happen or can't happen.
Not anytime soon.
But it's not one for one, okay? Because I mean, after all, you know, when you consider how the internet and then smartphones have penetrated our lives, I mean, there is an adoption curve, there's a learning curve. I mean, the work that's been done on electricity, how long it took. So I'm not a techno pessimist, and there are people who are techno pessimists, but I'm saying that the productivity of 1/5 of mankind cannot be yoked to just one technology.
No, I get what you're saying, and I think it's absolutely right to be able to anchor the conversations that we're having in the context of the times that we live in, as well as some of the larger ecosystem challenges that continue to exist. You know, we were talking about productivity gains from an economist's point of view, but I want to address the other issue, and let's talk about research. And one of the big challenges that India has faced is the fact that we haven't seen the kind of capital that should be invested in research, as well as the participation of the private sector in research and development. I mean, compare this to what's happening in China, for instance. Now, what do you believe is the way forward on that front, especially as we talk about emerging technologies, frontier technologies, and not just AI, but what is the role that the government can play, if any at all, to stimulate private sector investment in R&D?
Well, I would like to draw a distinction between basic research and innovation. I think what bothers me is there is less investment in research for innovation, except perhaps in pharma, than our peers. Okay?
Why do you think that's the case?
Let me just discuss, in a sense, the basic research and then come back to the corporate issue, for which, you know, lots of people have been trying to puzzle that out. I'm not sure that there's a consensus on what lies behind it. I have some hypotheses. But just on the basic research, let's be clear that much of the innovation in the US, certainly earlier and even now, is very dependent on government funding through entities like DARPA, okay?
Yeah.
And DARPA was set up for the, and still is largely connected with defense, you know, defense innovation. The, what I learned on my, you know, travels around the US speaking to, was that DARPA insists on consortia of universities working on a particular problem. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think we're moving in that direction, both with this National Research Foundation that we're setting up, and also this challenge grant of 1 lakh crores, which is yet to be defined. My point is that basic research should take place largely in universities, and government has a role, because you know, you don't get Nobel Prizes unless you're Bell Labs. Now, your other question about innovation in the Indian corporate sector. Look, research from rich countries, I'm less sure about research from emerging markets, is that people innovate when they are under competitive pressure. You know, a familiar complaint from our corporate sector is, look, it's an unfair world out there. China is subsidizing the whatever. We can't compete. Give us protection. All I can say is that then that's a recipe for companies getting lazy. I mean, government's done what it could with tax cuts, corporate tax cuts.
Yeah.
The market has been skyrocketing. The last time I looked, personal wealth was not in the dumps, but the research isn't happening. So one has to look at larger environmental factors. Oh, the innovation. Let me put it that way. Research for innovation. Okay?
But do you believe that from a competitiveness point of view, since you just brought that up, that if we don't see the kind of pickup that is expected on R&D, especially as far as the private sector is concerned, that we will be less competitive or uncompetitive in an increasingly commoditized world where technology is sort of, off the shelf and back on the shelf in a different version every couple of weeks these days.
I think there's a risk for that. But equally, what is impressive, not to the extent that one might wish, but our firms are investing abroad and do have a global footprint. So one would imagine for them to be competitive in those markets, they would have to invest. As I say, I'm not aware of any definitive research findings on this, but one can just see, as it were, the facts for what they are.
You said that the Prime Minister sees the use of AI in India as a tailwind and not a headwind. I'll ask you this in the context of the conversation that's happening around jobs, displacement, what happens to the jobs of the future, what happens to the current jobs, how many stay, how many go. Now, what's your own take on that, how disruptive AI and the use of AI is likely to be as far as jobs are concerned, and what that could mean potentially as a challenge, as a headwind for an economy with a young population like ours?
Well, I think it is, frankly, the services sector in the rich world that has more to worry about. So if they have reacted badly to the elimination of manufacturing jobs, this now threatens a much larger swathe of employment, because an economy like the US, I think, is about 80% services, and if those can be exported or made more productive by using labor in India, so that's, I think, a more important theater, and this will have an impact on our access to those markets. So we're seeing this around the H-1B already and what have you. But your question was about the domestic economy.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And let me just try and address that. We have to ask what kinds of jobs would be at risk, and those are clerical jobs, repetitive jobs, but it's if what I said earlier about India becoming even more a kind of services hub for the world, the aggregate number of jobs ought to rise in India, but then do we have the people for it? And that's where the issue of skilling, which apparently was discussed in the last panel, becomes incredibly important. Now, here it's somewhat puzzling because, the press is, and I'm not denying that this is important, is talking about angry, impatient youth. But then if you go, as I have, and talk to people in Bangalore, either in manufacturing, or they say, and there was the famous case of Larsen and Toubro talking about engineers, but they say that on the whole, we find enough people who we can train for our needs. So the issue then becomes one of scale. Can we provide employment on the right scale? Now, as you know, Niti has had a role in this. Prime Minister is, again, visionary in that he doesn't see the world of employment in the future as necessarily being what it has been in the past. And that's why he's always stressing startups, personal entrepreneurship, etc. So I think we are all going to have to shift our thinking from jobs in the kind of Japanese salaryman kind of way to, evolving livelihoods, partly self-employed, but also entrepreneurial, people kind of moving on. And so what I think one can say is that the pace of change in an AI world is going to be faster. And so, to my mind, what that creates is a huge need for what I know the Americans do well, I know less about Europe, which is continuous learning. I mean, in the US, community colleges give you an opportunity to upgrade your skills throughout your life. And I think we need to start thinking about, as it were, inevitable obsolescence. And PM has said this. He said that, for goodness sake, don't have our ITIs training people in internal combustion engines. Yeah. They must learn how to service EVs, EV batteries, etc. So that's part of what I mean, that these are challenges stimulated by technology and technological change, of which AI is only a part. And the other big driver is, of course, going to be global demographics as well.
Well, yes, global demographics as the rest of the world gets older. And of course, India presents itself with an opportunity of being the talent hub for the world across a whole bunch of different sectors. But as you pointed out, perhaps we are going to face fresh challenges now as far as mobility of talent as well as immigration is concerned. And we're seeing that starting to play out in the Trump administration. We don't know how it will eventually settle. But, you talked about larceny too, bro. And I'm going to get you to comment on whether you think 70 hours is good enough. You believe 90 hours is too much. What should it be? And how do you believe the government has a say in any of it?
Shirin, you walked into this. All I can
you
say
walked
is,
into it, actually.
that since I now have the privilege of also addressing of leading the Economic Advisory Council to the PM, and one of my colleagues is here, Nilesh, you have to ask my wife.
That was well played, sir. That was very well played. I have to say that was the perfect answer that you could have given us. But before I let you go, talk to us about the deliverables, and you were alluding to some of those, and leave us with what the deliverables will be now as far as both frontier tech and what you hope to do on that side, the Atal Innovation Program that NITI has been working on for several years now, and what you would like the government to prioritize as far as its AI roadmap is concerned?
Well, firstly, there's means and then there's ends. Clearly, and this is not rocket science, not that it's not rocket, it's been stressed that AI makes India's diversity a strength and does permit customized solutions literally to everybody by eliminating language as a barrier. Written language, spoken language. A first start is with Bhashni. And so, therefore, as a delivery mechanism, smartphones, etc., now become just that much more powerful. Now, where do you use that? Certainly, using it for customizing agricultural advice is an important area that's being thought about, because the old extension model can now be replaced by something much more customized. We are in an era of climate change,
yes,
and the question of how and how quickly people can respond to climate change will also be facilitated by this. And let's not forget that 40% of our population is still in some ways connected with agriculture. So making an impact on agricultural productivity where we are hideously behind the frontier is huge. Okay? Second, just in terms of large development issues which AI could help with, is outcomes in both health and education. Okay? I mean, we already are quite far advanced with the digital health mission. There are privacy rules in place, but the fact of the matter is that we now will have the database to get people to focus on our diseases in our context, rather than being dependent on, as it were, the priorities of the West. Unfortunately, we are going in some ways along the same track on non-communicable diseases, which we weren't, obesity, diabetes, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But, even this issue of, for example, local air pollution, not only the question of apportionment, but what is the actual impact it is having on people. So, but all of this does depend on two things, which is good for employment. One is reliable data.
Yeah.
And therefore there's a huge, not only reliable data challenge, but also, as was being said somewhere the other day, that you defining protocols so that that data can be used in AI models. And all of this is going to take people, okay? So I would say agriculture, health, and education would be three big applications, but I end where I began, which is that none of this is in the lap of the central government. Almost all of it will involve working with the states, and the capacity of the states is, as you know, very varied. So NITI will try and lead, try and coax. We, have an annual Chief Secretaries Conference, but if I could end by saying that we are attempting to replace the power of the purse by the power of persuasion and ideas.
Well, we hope that the powers of persuasion that you put to use do deliver results on the ground. And yes, for India to prosper, we do need all states as well as the center to work towards not just making AI happen and AI adoption take off, but to address many of the access deficits that continue to hold us back and constrain us. Dr. Berry, always a pleasure. Many, many thanks for joining us here today to take us through where NITI stands on the AI debate, and more importantly, what you believe the priorities should be for the government going ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the Vice Chairman of the NITI Aayog. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Dr. Berry. Could I request both of you to stay with us for a few more minutes, please? Shireen, if I could just request you to offer a small token of appreciation to Dr. Berry, please. And we could have a louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Always so fascinating to hear from sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Shireen. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you're enjoying the evening so far. We've discussed so many fascinating facets and insights about artificial intelligence, but really when I say trust me that the party is only half done, because we have a lot more to hear as far as the industry players are concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, we now want to move forward with another panel discussion, and this is very, very aptly titled. It's called Shaping the Future, the Gen AI Revolution in Economy as well as the Workforce Dynamics. Now, me and you agree that artificial intelligence is discussed in our households, dining tables, workplace conversations, almost on a day-to-day basis. And there is one big elephant in the room that is discussed by each one of us. And the question is how generative AI will impact the economy, but most importantly, the workforce dynamics as well. And some of the questions that me and you discuss every day is something that we'll try and get answers with on our next panel. Will AI create more opportunities, or will it lead to widespread job displacement? The other big question, how will industries and workers adapt to this evolution or revolution, as I should say, that is happening on a day-to-day basis? Most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we'll also try and understand and explore how Gen AI is really reshaping industries, but also creating a lot more new jobs and altering the very nature of work. We'll also discuss the role of leadership in guiding this transformation and the evolution of skills that is really needed. And last but not the least, how businesses can prepare for this AI-driven future. So I think I've set the tone and context, but I'll leave it rest to our stellar panel and our moderator. Join me in welcoming our moderator back on stage, Shireen Bagh.
Right here in the middle.
Okay, we'll let Shireen be there then. Okay, let me try and welcome our stellar panel then. Let me join me in welcoming Swaroop Mohanty, Vice Chairman and CEO of Mirai Asset, one of India's top investment firms. We also have Nilesh Shah, MD at Kotak Asset Management, a leader in the finance sector. Dr. Bharat Kaushal, Corporate Officer at Hitachi and Managing Director, Hitachi India. We also have Atul Bilal, Vice Chairman and MD at Dixon Technologies, a pioneer in electronics. Also join me in welcoming Ashutosh Khanna, co-founder and director at Walkwater Talent Advisors, a leader in HR and talent management. We also have Rajneesh Gupta, partner at EY India, specializing in tax and economic policy. Join me in also welcoming Neha Sharma, partner at EY India's People Advisory Services, and expert in organizational change and workforce transformation. And I'd let Shireen be there to take this conversation forward. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Ridhima. Back again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us here this evening. What a star cast we have, and so I thought it would be better for me to be here to try and engage with our panelists this evening, and also try and get our guests who are here to listen in to the insights to participate in a larger brainstorm. So without further ado, let me come to you and give us a synopsis very quickly, a snapshot of what the report highlights. We've all heard that 15% number now, but tell us a little bit more about what the report is highlighting in terms of where we currently stand, Rajneesh, in terms of adoption, but more importantly, what you believe the levers will have to be to take that 15% number to 50% if that in fact is the aspiration.
Okay, one of the things that we have done in the report is to actually try and put a number onto what will be the economy-wide improvement in the efficiency, some of it which got talked in the previous conversation that you were having. So in an earlier panel, there was a talk about 30% being the type of impact which is there on the labor. Now what we did was we looked at the CLEMS database, basically, which is there, which is published by the RBI. And what you have is, when you look at the output of a sector, there are 4 or 5 things which go into it. One is the labor, second is the capital, third is the energy, fourth is the material, and fifth are the services that they take. So we are only talking about the labor productivity. Now when we extrapolated the labor productivity number on what it means for our economy-wide efficiency improvement for the economy, so we were getting a number of something like 2.6%. This is counting only the organized sector, basically, which is there, and say over a 5-year period. Now the other question is that what is the reference of 2.6%?
Yeah.
So what is there is, we also looked at the numbers that the RBI has done over the years to see what is the annual productivity improvement that we have in the economy, which is there. So that number in years where the growth is good comes to something like 0.9%
Okay.
On an economy-wide basis, basically, which is there. So if the organized sector was to adopt this, this is what we are looking at. And besides the organized sector, you have a very large unorganized sector,
Yes.
Which is there in the economy. Now, it's very difficult to say what will be the time frame in which they will take this up and they'll adopt. And you have different type of narratives which are there. One, this is the fastest adopting technology. And then you also have narratives which are there. Look, the companies took so many years to set up their websites to get this thing. So you have both the sides which is there. Now that gives something like an extra 2.8% if the unorganized sector was to adopt that. And the other thing is that in this, we have not taken, if AI was to, for example, impact the material cost, or it was to impact the capital, what it does. It is done totally on the labor. Now, when you get one side, one step lower, which is there, where you start looking at the sectors which are there, then even though you have the same labor productivity improvement, say, in 2 different sectors, but the impact on the output can be very, very different, depending upon what is the share of the labor. So if it's a very, very capital intensive or where the material costs are very high, labor, productivity will not translate into such a high overall productivity improvement with the sector like in the services, like especially healthcare and education and all, where labor costs tend to be typically much, much larger, which is there. So this, Shreen, was one of the things that we have done to do this sort of a model, basically, which is there in the report.
So there is headroom for potentially even improving on that number, as you pointed out, because this largely factors in only labor. But if there were to be other factors and parameters that you look at, we could potentially see an even better number than you spoke of. But that's a pretty ambitious number that you've put out already.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's a number. It's based upon the model. I don't think so. We have taken irrational assumptions over there. And it also depends upon what the uptake of the technology is going to be like. And then there are all these policy issues which are there, you know, like how quickly you get the compute infrastructure, how does the cost go down. So I think there are several factors which are there. And all what we are saying is that this is the type of potential that GenAI holds for uplifting the productivity of the Indian economy at an overall level.
Yes, and I think that's an important point that you make, and you were right in pointing out that there are many challenges or impediments that need to be addressed at this point in time. Of course, the cost of intelligence, which has of course been declining but continues to be a factor that we need to contend with. Compute power, of course, the government has put down a number there of 10,000 GPUs, but that's nowhere close to what a market like China is doing at this point in time. So of course, there's a long distance to be covered there as well, and other issues that you spoke of, but I'll come to that in just a bit. It's also interesting, and to take forward the conversation that I was having with Dr. Berry, that we're having this conversation in a week that India has been obsessed whether 70 hours is too little or 90 hours is too much. So Nilesh Bhai, let me come to you now to talk about how the AI story is really going to shape the India economic story going forward. And financial services is perhaps going to be one of the early adopters and one of the faster adopters in terms of the accelerated pace of usage. A, what's been the experience so far? B, what do you believe the next 5 years look like?
So one, if you had a choice of fighting with Iron Man suit and without Iron Man suit, what will you choose? You are bound to choose Iron Man suit to fight competition. The same thing is true on the AI side. Not only I have to adopt AI, but I have to adopt better than Swaroop Mohanty so that I can win in the market. Number two, in the financial world, data is easily available. And the basis of AI to some extent is data, private as well as public. And which is why we have seen early adoption of AI in financial markets. I think 5 years down the line, there will be a computer sitting in my place answering your question than me.
Well, it should be able to tell us whether the market is going to go up or down on a particular day, and do that with credibility and accuracy.
So I don't think so we have a choice. We'll be able to extend our career by leveraging AI, and I'll have to leverage better than my peers. Now, how does this whole thing evolve? One of the consulting reports suggests that Indian enterprises adopting AI is almost as much as there in the Western world. Unlike industrial revolution, which we missed, digital revolution, AI revolution, we are not behind. The second thing which we are seeing right now, AI is more driven by hardware and more driven by large language models.
Yes.
Going forward, it will be more software, more services, and more small language model. I think these are the areas where Indian companies will have an edge, and we will be in a position to add value to our clientele. As Indian companies leverage on these parts, Indian finance industry will also be leveraging the same. And eventually there will be a world who is leveraging AI to deliver cheaper, faster, better solutions to their customer, and the other guys will become dinosaur.
Well, you're hoping that the Swaroop next to you is probably going to be in that category, and Swaroop is trying desperately
No way.
to wear his Iron Man suit and pad up to take you on. But I just want to understand from you, in terms of where things currently stand, from a mutual fund industry's perspective, where are we on the actual adoption?
So a lot of us have moved into machine learning for reading balance sheets. What an analyst used to take a couple of days or many hours is now happening in 2 minutes and without any error. Many of us have started using factor analytics to improve our portfolio construction. We are also leveraging AI for customer service and customer penetration, cross-sell, upsell. But at the end of the day, please remember that AI will be driven by people below 30, not people above 30. So I am at a serious disadvantage and I'll have to give leeway to younger generation to use AI in my company. We are, with little bit of charities, can say that we are the present, but the future is certainly not us. And many of us uncharitably fall in the past category. So the leadership for AI transformation will have to go to younger generation. And we'll have to give them freedom to fail, because not everything will work out. And most important thing, which I think as a company we are trying and everyone should try, is to make people aware about the risks of AI. Your data can just leak out. Your secrets can leak out. There are issues related to privacy. There are issues related to risk. There are issues related to security. So organization will have to evolve as a culture to accept AI and leverage it for the benefit.
No, absolutely. Those are very real risks, and those are risks that we need to address in the present moment, not somewhere 5 years down the future. It's a present danger that needs to be addressed. But Bharat-san, let me come to you now, because we're talking about what AI can potentially do on the services side, but what can it do on the manufacturing side? More importantly, what is it already doing on the manufacturing side today?
See, we have, as Hitachi, we have both experiences where you're very closely witnessing AI as an enabler, but AI also as a cultural shift that is taking place. So when you saw the digital India revolution, yes, healthcare, education, the empowerment, entitlement of the society went manifold. And it was unique in India because society got to 5.0 before industry really went to 4.0 and multiple forms of industry. So industry has been a journey where assisted intelligence, augmented intelligence, even autonomous intelligence is coexisting in the Indian situation. So building the whole ecosystem of deep learning and ML, the academic institutions, the startup ecosystem. I mean, there are existing assets and there are foundational and newer technologies which need to be adopted. I mean, we are now the biggest rail company and energy transmission company in the world. And both these sectors are big priorities in the Indian context. But their cost to income ratio is as high as 98%. So if you put an AI gadget on top of hardware, whether it's an energy storage to prevent losses of renewable energy going from base load to peak load, or you are able to bring railway maintenance down by 25% just by putting cloud monitored tools on the wheel to track everything. All of this is the real impact, which is the experiment underway, successful in India. But you have to be very responsible with the kind of data that you're holding.
Yes.
And I mean, frankly, there is a lot of talk about the regulatory framework and all of that, but you will need AI to run AI and control AI. Because the speed with which agentic AI, when the assistants will talk with each other, and the memory will be bagged, and 6G will have no latency, so the man and machine architecture with high-speed computing will deliver. The biggest challenge that manufacturing today has is that how will operating technologies respond when I say I want to offer energy as a service, mobility as a service, infra as a service? Because all that data would be computed and available.
Yeah.
So we've just become better learners and maybe more sincere students at the end of 34 years of work.
Well, we hope that we continue to be better learners and more sincere students as we move forward. And I guess as Nilesh Bhai was saying, that we really have no choice but to do that. But what I want to understand from you, since so much of what we're saying here this evening is that the conversation has moved from promise to proof. And in different ways, it's playing out across different sectors differently. I want to understand the return on investments at this point in time. For instance, what is the kind of money, what's the kind of capital that you're putting in place to get smarter, better, and how is that resulting in outcomes already for you? What are we talking about, the return on investments for what you are doing at this point in time?
So, I mean, for 10 years, people have been talking in our kinds of industry that B2B plus B2C should be the answer, a CapEx plus OPEX should be a model. But if you look at the economic value chain, it's now that it's come in an India where not just implementation speed, but quality consciousness has also come, to look at the users of the customers. So you start looking at the entire value chain. Earlier, in an example in South India, in one of the big metros, I was doing the rolling stock or the rail control. Now I'm also putting elevators at 1.5 kilometers for 120 kilometers, maybe 12 elevators. Then I'm doing the ticketing. Then I'm doing CCTV. Then I'm doing cybersecurity. Now I'm doing passenger entertainment. All of that becomes part of the economic value chain on how you see the return. Part of it is on the asset class side, and part of it is on the user monetization
Absolutely.
side. So there are different plays. The cross-sectional platforms always are not just about this vertical of railway or power business, but they are being able to be used for, say, a central Vista command and control center, the same capability set. Right? So there is no one answer, as Nilesh Bhai rightly said. The large language model was the first one, which took predictive to corrective. But as you go out of the rule-based system, you have to prepare yourself for capacity and monetization unlocking. When you go into out of the rule box, when machines become smarter. Historically, we've all made instruments which suddenly seem more dumb, whether it's the defense equipment or the medical equipment or a musical instrument. Now everything can produce results on its own. So you're looking at that architecture, where to make money from. So, as I said, going back to, we'll all learn in this process, and we are continuing to do that.
Atullah, let me ask you this, and let's keep it very, very simple. You're in a business that operates with wafer-thin margins, and no pun intended there, but what does the use of AI potentially mean as far as margin expansion is concerned?
See, first, very significant opportunity. We operate in the electronic manufacturing services sector, which undoubtedly is a low-margin industry. Right from consumer to IT to telecom, everything is migrating to intelligent devices driven by AI. There's a feature of AI today launched in CES Vegas, even on a television, which can talk to you. So this is an opportunity for the EMS industry, because the manufacturing science becomes much more complex. AI servers, which is leading to margin expansion. Because more the complexity, you demand a better value add. And this is being reflected in the numbers of all the global EMSs. You look at the last 2 quarter numbers, there's a significant improvement. So I have this conviction that the same thing, same syndrome is going to happen in India too very shortly. The second is, when you're in a low margin, this is a science which has to be used for launch of products much faster. This is a science which should improve your DFMs. This is a science which can predict your supply chains and reduce your working capital intensity. This is a science which generates the manufacturing execution system data on a real-time basis, which you can correct your lines on a real-time basis. This is a science which helps you in skilling your people. This is a science which helps you in improving the productivity and also in your CRMs. However, this is the intent, and the intent is noble.
I know, you were making it sound like magic.
But we have a long way to go. I think we'll have to partner the best of the global companies. We'll have to incite the global talent, just like in 70s and 80s, the global economists, the Indian economists, they came back to India to shape India's future. These 200, 300, 400 very bright youngsters should come back. You need to incite them, you need to lure them, you need to have a huge cultural change in the organization to create an ecosystem which will attract them to be here in India in these exciting times. Because that's a gap, that's a huge gap. The intent is there, possibly at some level the clarity is there. So again, on two tangents. One feels that the margin profile of EMS industry, just like it's happening globally, should improve. because you're migrating to more complex manufacturing. And second, the improvement in the value chain operations.
Well, I'll address both of those issues in a bit, but let's address the people issue that you left us with. And before I get Ashutosh to comment on that, I want to come to you, Neha, and talk about the EY jobs report as well, and link that to what we heard from Rajneesh as well. So, take us to what the jobs report is telling us in the context of this AI agentic future that we envisage.
Sure. So thanks so much. So I think over the last, 12 to 15 months, there's been like so much of discussion around jobs and, productivity-led, what's going to be the impact on jobs. And, if I just sort of look at some of the news feeds that we've all seen, from probably Elon Musk talking about, all human jobs are going to sort of be taken away by AI, to even Bill Gates really saying that we'll probably move towards a 3-day week, of course.
Well, clearly not anytime soon in India.
yeah, I know. I think that requires a bit of a leadership mindset shift. But 3 days, working week. And but at the same point in time, we have, say, World Economic Forum, which is, talking about in 2025, which is like, this year itself, some 97 million jobs are going to get, created, and 85 million jobs are going to get displaced.
Yes.
Net addition is still there, but there's like a huge churn that is expected. Yes. So I think from an EY standpoint, we sort of wanted to, get a little deeper into this and really understand what does impact on jobs really mean, and, how should organizations or individuals really prepare for this. And we analyzed over, 10,000 odd tasks, which cut across different sectors, and industries, and really contribute to the, running of the Indian economy. And we looked at these tasks from, 3 different lenses. The first one really was, around exposure. So to what degree does a task really lend itself to automation? And I think the study has to be at a fundamental level of task and not jobs.
Yeah.
The second thing that we, the parameter that we looked at was complementarity, which is to what degree does you still require human interface, and you still require, humans sort of looking at the outcome of the task itself. And the third factor that we looked at it was intensity, which is how frequently do I do this task? Am I doing this daily or quarterly, or it's maybe an annual exercise, just to really get a sense around the effort and volume.
Yeah.
And what our study really reveals is that of the 10,000 tasks that we studied, 42% of these tasks can be augmented, which means that, AI will help us really in terms of...
So you don't actually replace the human being.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is augmentation. This is going to really help us. But about 24% of these tasks can be completely automated, which means they should ideally, if not already happening, but in the next, 3 to 5 years, they should be out of our, workflow. So, and this in totality is going to help us, free about 8 to 10 hours per week for a corporate employee in India. And I think that's something that we all actually need here, given so many concerns around mental health issues across.
Now, that's a very important point that you bring up. One, the distinction between tasks and jobs, but more importantly about the kinds of tasks that are likely to be automated. If you can give us a sense of what we're talking about, which are the ones that are going to be the most easily sort of transformed by way of moving to a machine, and where do you believe, or which sectors do you believe will be the most vulnerable on account of that?
Sure. So I'll probably take an example, and I think we've all spoken a lot about call center jobs or software development jobs, so I won't take that example. Let me talk about something which is, say, store operations. Now, today when you walk into, a retail store, there are a, number of people who are there to assist you, to help you with your, shopping preferences. Now, what's going to really happen is that some of those tasks which are, say, billing, processing, customer, sort of complaint related, some of those tasks are going to get completely automated and probably out of, that's not going to require a lot of focus from people. What's going to get really augmented is, where you will probably have a bit of a history about the person walking in. You will know their preferences. You will know a bit of their taste. And another aspect of, the task study that we did was that there's going to be a significant number of tasks that will be amplified. What essentially that means is that you will require as an individual higher degree of competence, intelligence or compassion to be able to deal with those tasks better.
Yeah.
So as a store operations, person, I'm expected to be probably, know a lot more about fashion, about my clientele,
Yeah.
about being able to advise. So that's a broad example.
So artificial intelligence married with emotional intelligence is what you're basically alluding to, and that potentially provides a space for certain kinds of jobs to continue to exist with human intervention. But Ashutosh, and I don't want to get into this facetious debate about 70 or 90, but that is a challenge that we need to address. And as we look at staffing requirements, as we look at workflow dynamics, as we look at the workforce itself in an AI era, in a smarter industrial era, what is it going to mean in terms of a challenge in the way that we hire, the way that we train, the way that we retain talent as well?
So firstly, I mean, it's so good to hear from Neha that there are going to be so many millions of job creation. So it's good for my industry. But trust me, I mean, last 3.5 years, the amount of CDIO, CIO, CISO, these kind of roles that we have done, which has never been done before. So companies require this kind of leadership talent first, and then build teams around that. So from my perspective on the job side, I mean, which I wanted to specifically talk about, that, when you look at the kind of, the AI that is now coming in, the job displacement that we are talking about, I personally don't see the job displacement as an issue. Because when we talk to our clients today, and when, one of our largest clients, which is a Indian conglomerate, I mean, they're using AI pilots across various businesses. So they talk about, code generation, to using AI in procuring coal better,
Yeah.
to using AI for fashion designing, to as diverse projects as that. I mean, our fintech clients are using it for risk modeling, etc., risk management, merchant onboarding, etc. None of them have let anybody go. So this whole issue around job displacement is overrated as of now. So new jobs are getting created. That is happening for sure. But one of our clients that we spoke to recently, when we are running the search for a VP product support for a global SaaS company, and that company talks about that, okay, we have not hired 40 more engineers because we have used AI technologies. That only goes to show that certain repetitive tasks, the job growth will be slower. So there will be slowdown in the job growth in, some kind of jobs, which are repetitive jobs, but then there will be new job creation.
Don't you also believe that that's a function of adoption itself at this point in time? I mean, look at the commentary that's coming in from big tech in the US, which are the early adopters, which have been able to, onboard, whether it is generative AI, ML, and so on and so forth for years now. I mean, already you're starting to see the Googles of the world saying, look, 25% of our code is now being generated by generative AI, and so on and so forth. So don't you believe that the displacement is going to be a function of the adoption itself?
Yeah, so there will be slowdown in growth. I mean, I have not seen at least companies letting go of people because
just yet.
Just yet. And there are no new job creation, but there is a slowdown in the job creation for sure for some of the repetitive tasks. That's what I'm seeing.
Neha, you want to come in on this? How much of the adoption and displacement do we have to sort of marry together to contextualize the real impact as far as jobs are concerned?
Sure. So I think it's a fact that jobs are going to get impacted. And when I say jobs, it has to get translated into tasks that constitute that job. So certain parts, and it's probably true for everybody sitting in this room, certain parts of the work that we do will get automated, should be out of our workflows, and certain parts will get augmented, and we will all require a higher level of intelligence and to be able to deliver, certain other parts of the job that we are expected to deliver. So in our study, at least, the way it's coming across is that at an overall India level, there will be about 38 million jobs that will get impacted or will be transformed over the next 3 to 5 years, and that requires a huge upskilling effort.
Upskilling will have to be crucial. Sarup, let me address the issue with you in terms of how you see the use of it, what you've already been able to do, and what are the benefits that are starting to accrue already to the organization on account of it.
I think, Shireen, thank you so much for having me. I think the whole pursuit of this was what Nilesh Bhai said, is can we remain relevant? But if you see the answers that my age group is giving, we are relevant. But it's that pursuit which landed me to go back to education, and I landed up in Palo Alto, the seat of GenAI in Stanford, and the recruitment of the head of AI for our organization really, led me to get to some conclusions. That there was a time when there were a lot of people thinking whether we'll use Google Maps or not.
Yeah.
Right now we are in that stage where we'll use ChatGPT or not. Now, when you look at both of them, what has changed it, data analysis is already irrelevant. You ask, you get. And that's the change which GenAI will get. So when you started thinking of AI, there was GenAI, and now we are talking about agentic AI, and now we're talking about physical AI. Before you know, all this will change, and that's where is the opportunity going forward. Now, when we look at jobs or the uses of jobs, now the fact is what Neha mentioned, if there's a customer coming in and I catch that name, by the time the customer is sitting with my customer executive, I know the entire history of that person at the back end, and that's where it will go. Now, from our perspective, what is going to happen is, when you talk about data, there's a lot of noise. The industry will now move from clearing up that noise to what is relevant data.
So noise to signal essentially.
Completely relevant. A lot of new jobs will be created in that segment. People who adapt to that will survive and move on. People who were coders earlier are now Python coders, and they're going to move into other areas is a fact. We run a small, AI index business here out of Gurgaon, and you'll be surprised how many people in Gurgaon sit out and create indices for the rest of the world. All employees, whether they're accounts guys or whether they're sales guys, are all Python efficient. That's how it will go. And from our perspective, we see that as enablers. And when we started, I didn't know these terms called LLM or data lake.
Yeah.
And now I am fluently using what we call use cases, and we found use cases for each job profile. And as we start, you can depend on the normal chat GPTs that are there or any GPT, or you start creating your own LLM. And that's where I think Nilesh Bhai and I will probably differ. He will create his own LLM, I'll create my own LLM. My LLM will cater to my need and will lead to a fund management output which does not need to analyze. The fund manager will use the GPT to ask and get the reply. And that's where the pace of things will go to a very different level. It will free us to do a lot more things that we can possibly do. I don't agree on that 3-day week. We will start utilizing the other 2 days to do far more things that we were capable of. And I think that this will probably be an enabler at a different level. What I saw there, suppose you see the Waymo in the roads there, driverless car, is because the data has been cleaned up for that car to be utilized. Thankfully, we're still a little bit behind for a lot of work to be done. But we will get there quicker than we think. And that's where the opportunity is. That is where a ton of jobs will be created. Now there'll be enough people on your side now analyzing that same data, both audio, written and video, and telling us that this is the relevant data for you. And that's where we are going to move to.
Bharat, let me address the issue of opportunity that presents itself for India, and especially in the context of manufacturing. I mean, we've gone from Industry 4.0 now to whatever, I don't know what version we're talking about or what version we will talk about in the next 5 years. But from the enabling environment perspective, from the levers that we now need to deploy to ensure that we remain competitive, that we make good use, because what's the use of technology if it's not put to use for the benefit of people and for the larger economy? So what do you believe the factory of the future in the context of an intelligent era is going to look like?
The meaning of factory, when you look at customized solutions and different environments.
It's already changed.
It has gone through it is undergoing a huge transformation, because there is an ecosystem that is the value, if there is an economic value chain of how it will be sold to a customer and how you will do an OPEX with the users of the customer, there is also R&D which goes, there is design and engineering which goes, there is process automation, and then there is implementation engineering work that is required in delivering an outcome, because you're no more selling a product really. You're offering even that capacity set of product. If you really want to look at a better IRR, then you're in the game to deliver it as a service. It's not anymore maintenance and spare parts and all of that. It's being the operator. And the value add is that only those, because the complete data that exists today, this precise domain data with high-speed computing will begin to get exhausted in 1.5 to 2 years. But the new points where data will emerge, whether it's in education, healthcare, payment cycles, or utilities, or wherever people are using, those, unless you're the operator of those systems, being producer, you will be, put on the side to just 8% or 7% return. But if you really want the economic value chain to give you double-digit return, then you'll have to be in the game to respond to those changes. That's when this platform's efficacy will come. And the other thing about hypersensitive, hyper-personalized solution engineering is that you need to sort of work backwards on, there will be a consumption pattern change. When I'm not getting into 70 hours and 90 hours, I'm just trying to say, when people have a little more time, leisure will change the meaning of consumption of data. And people will behave differently. Today we are just arriving at basic threshold services. 5 years down the line, it will be a different matrix which we'll look at.
Oh, that's an interesting aspect that you bring in. Nilesh, let me get you to talk about what we just heard there from Bharat San in terms of how this could potentially also change the way that we consume, what it does as far as per capita is concerned, what it does as far as discretionary spends go. I mean, what's the assumptions that you're making in terms of the transformative impact that this could potentially have?
So one assumption we are making is that we don't know anything about future and we'll keep our minds open. We'll see how data comes and then we'll take the decision.
Fair enough.
There's no point in committing yourself when you're facing Brett Lee. You might as well keep minds open and then play the ball on its merit. But let me bring two incidences on AI. Many years back in India, we launched computerization in a public financial institution. Normally, we have seen that whenever productivity multiplier technology is introduced, the low-end jobs are eliminated, and thanks to productivity increase, high-end jobs are created. But in India, we created a differentiated model. All the typists were promoted to officer level. So low-end jobs were not eliminated, in fact, they were enhanced. And then people came to operate computers. So there was a win-win situation for low-end, high-end jobs. Of course, the public financial institutions suffered. And hence the learning for organization. There will be certain sacrifices of low-end jobs. And if you don't make that, then ensure that government is your sponsor. The second thing is related to Second World War, where Germans introduced Panzer tank. They were fast moving. And the Russian tanks were incapable of reaching out to them. To counter Panzer tank, they created a dog squad. Dogs were lapped with explosives. And then they were trained to go below the tanks. When the battle began and they let go their dogs, they were actually going below the Russian tanks and exploding. Why did that happen? Well, you made a crucial mistake. Panzer tanks were driven on petrol and Russian tanks were trained on running on diesel. And these dogs were trained to smell diesel, not petrol. So they were exploding Russian tanks. So AI is also like that. If you're training it on diesel and hoping that it will work on petrol, it's not going to work. So be careful about using right data, experiment it, measure it, manage it, and then launch it on a bigger scale. Second, don't pre-commit yourself to anything. We are seeing, even in our organization as well as outside, how AI is changing rapidly. Probably what happened with lab-grown diamonds will happen in AI as well. The first lab-grown machine, the cost of producing lab-grown diamond is down by 90% by the time latest model has come. So you'll have to really keep eyes and ears open and let younger generation take the call. And you should be a facilitator rather than pushing them to do anything.
Well, those are good examples that you gave. And, I was actually very surprised. We did a whole story on the boom that the lab and so forth. What would you change and so forth. What would you change at this point in time in terms of perhaps policy, in terms of even the way that organizations do their businesses, to ensure that we can actually be AI ready, and more importantly, we can be ahead in the game as far as an AI future is concerned?
So I think first and the foremost thing for any organization is that it has to shed what it has been doing for decades.
What have you shed?
I think the first thing is that you need to bring in people in whom you have a genuine conviction that they're better than you. They're younger than you, they're much smarter than you, and you're open to the stream of thought process which is happening globally. Also, it's a mindset change that it has to be a calibrated effort. When we're going to pursue this, there are bound to be some accidents. So adequate resources, more than adequate resources, tremendous tenacity is required to pursue this path. But can you skip it? If you skip it, then you are dead.
You know what I'm hearing from each one of you, and Swaroop said that, Nilesh Bhai said that, and you're talking about it as well, that we're probably going to see perhaps a much younger leadership as far as organizations are concerned, partly because of capabilities, partly because of the kind of the requirements as far as skills are concerned. So is that a given? Are Indian organizations going to be now much younger at the top?
I definitely feel so. You can just be there observing them, learning from them, somehow, somewhere chipping in, but it's the age for these youngsters.
Ashutosh, is that what you're seeing as well?
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, when we are looking at leadership roles, I mean, 40, 42, 43, I mean, beyond that, it starts becoming very difficult.
Really?
Yeah.
40, 42?
40, 42, 45, up to that. After that, it starts becoming very difficult. Yeah, so I don't think so anybody needs to find jobs here. But yeah, but yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Arun that we will see more and more younger leadership going forward.
And Swaroop, you got a big smile on your face.
Shirin, we work very differently. We are very Korean, so we are in your face. In my organization, above 55, you are tracked every year. And I was giving this.
That sounds awful.
No, it's the reality. I mean, I have to perform. Thankfully, I'm still not there. But after that, I have to perform year on year to keep myself relevant. That's the truth. And I narrated this to one of the largest IIMs of the country.
Yeah.
That, careers will be very different from here on. You can't, rest on your past laurels. And as you grow older, and the demography of India is already there in front of you, there'll be a young person who will do my job better than me at half my salary. That's the truth, whether I accept it or not. And sooner I wake up to that reality, better. And you will see the youth of India performing exceedingly well, and they are the future. And if you don't wake up to that reality and remain relevant year on year, you'll be eased out sooner than you think.
Well, I would imagine that, I don't know how many in this room are above the age of 40, but those of you who are, this is a cautionary message that's coming in from the panel. I will come across to you if you have questions, but specific questions for each of our panel. If anybody does, do raise your hands and I will get the microphone across to you at this point in time. Yes, you do have a question. Let me get to you, sir. Go ahead.
Do I need to stand or can I? Yeah, hi. Yeah. Thank you, and it's really nice hearing all of you. We are on the subject shaping India's AI story. A lot of people still are in the, in the rural areas. So, is there anything for them to come up, because not many of us are in the metros who are getting access to the data, the case studies, and all those stuff. So, how do we do, and what do we need to do for them so that India can come to that curve?
Rajneesh, you want to take this, because this is part of what the report also talks about, the need to build out what's happening on the index side of the models and so on and so forth as well.
Yeah. So I'd say, the rural India is not going to be left out of this entire thing. So some of the things which the government is talking about and which the vice chair of Niti Aayog talked about was, for example, how can you help the farmers, basically, which is there. So I think there are two perspectives. One is where do you create these solutions? And second thing is who's using the solutions which are there. And I think the biggest benefit which will come to a country like India is especially being able to provide, for example, very good healthcare solutions to people who are living outside. So we, on a little unrelated thing, we did one study which was about a year and a half back, which is looking at dialysis. People wanting treatment for dialysis. And one of the big problems was that people who are living far away, is there any center which is near them? So, you know, when you look at medical facilities, they tend to be concentrated in a few cities.
Yeah.
So I think the way we use digitization and AI solutions to solve a lot of problems for the rural India, so I don't think so they'll be left behind at all.
Well, so that end, but they will have
I
to...
can add over there, Shireen.
Yes, please.
There are different models which will emerge. One will be a Amul model, where cooperative societies will use technology to provide solution to rural India. The second will be Fab India kind of platform model, where they will use technology to bring buyer and seller together. The third could be what I have recently learned, where Avishkar and Arohan kind of, let's call impact fund, which are investing in rural entrepreneurship and linking them with technology in outside world. Multiple ways, eventually things will emerge. And while all this are emerging, will also require Anand Kumar, which will pick up people from really rural India background, poor background, and make them worthy of joining IIT.
Yeah.
So different models, different successes, all will have to work.
No, absolutely. You're right in pointing out that it will probably not be a one-size-fits-all solution, and especially for a country as diverse as India. We have a doctor in the house. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Sharon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Sanjay Sood. I'm Chief Medical Officer, Super Speciality Blocks of the Jung Hospital. Healthcare is getting extremely expensive, and it is bound to be so. It's very expensive in the US, UK. You don't get appointments for very long. If anything, like you mentioned about dialysis, that's a very small end of the story. There is a primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care. Where do you think AI will take medical care, including manpower, which is short, available in India? So what is your vision for healthcare in India? And how can you make it cheaper?
Rajneesh?
So,
you're quasi-government today, so we're going to throw all the tough questions to you.
So let me say one thing. One, I'm not a healthcare expert. You know, I'm a general policy and economics, what I focus on. But I'd say, you know, you require, if I'm living in a very remote area, I require actually everything which is there, which is whether primary, secondary, or tertiary service, basically, which is there, depending upon what my need is. And I think using a lot of, one of the things that digitization does to a country, it breaks the physical barriers which are there. You don't have to travel. You can do a lot of things online, consult with a lot of people online, which is there. So what I expect AI would do to healthcare is, one is make a lot of Indian diseases treatable, what Dr. Suman Berry was talking about, not be very focused on, you know, what is happening in the West. And I think it'll actually make healthcare cheaper, basically, which is there, because you could employ a lot of people in the rural areas, potentially speaking, who are not paid that much, and you're consulting one expert, or you are consulting with some algorithm which is there to be able to detect and find things which are there. So I think more digitization and more AI will democratize healthcare, rather than
the hope is that it will bridge both the access deficit as well as bring down the cost of accessing some of these services like medical you know, facilities, etc. So if you wanted to make a point, I'll come to you, Bharat, in just a second. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a very quick one. I mean, you know, we're the largest provider of Ayushman Bharat IDs in the private sector. And there is a huge demand and supply gap between doctors and the entitlement of organized health services. But the experiment started in Karnataka through Niti Aayog and primary health centers, also in the aspirational districts of India. And there's a quarterly report generated by the number of hours saved and the distance traveled saved and the money saved by people in rural areas. It is tremendous because tertiary healthcare facilities are not always the answers to where they are. Urban is a little bit different environment, and when you see Bangalore, it is very different from maybe other places. But the idea is to provide, I mean, so far there is a lot of regulatory part on the clinical side of the advice. The diagnostic side saves a lot of time because the doctors must only deliver the clinical advice. And therefore, that part, let's take only 3 minutes of a doctor and 4 minutes of a doctor instead of 10 minutes, but give an experiential outcome to the person that is satisfied that everything is entered into what it is. So, and there is seamlessness on he can go anywhere and the same data can be retrieved and then provided. So, yes, but at the same time, I do agree that, you know, as thresholds go up, there is a challenge in making sure that, you know, the initial costs of providing that threshold of services under National Health Digital Mission are also available, and that will be capital intensive.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Which is why the role of the government is critical in all of this. Swaroop, go ahead.
Shirin, I'm sorry I have to say this and be the devil's advocate. Dr. Saab, the cost of medical to a consumer has got nothing to do with AI or science. The penetration of medical insurance will only ensure that this cost goes up. That's the reality. I don't see medical costs going down for Indians at all in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. With the penetration of insurance being higher, the medical costs will only, thankfully I will not bear it. I'll bear a small premium, but this is the reality of global pharma, and that's how it will work in India, is my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm desperately wrong, but I think I'm right.
Well,
I'll give you a vision. My son, he's a software engineer at the Amazon World Headquarters. Recently, he had come to India. I'm just giving you an idea what is going to happen. Doctors are also going to get out of business if they don't upskill themselves. He got a report. He put it to ChatGPT. Half the time he tells me ChatGPT is doing my work. He put the report to ChatGPT, and the answer which he showed me was better than 99.9% of the doctors would have known, because that was the latest guidelines which none of the doctors know. So he could get a report, evaluation through ChatGPT much better than 99.9% of the doctors.
Well, and that is the promise and the potential of harvesting data the right way. And that was something that we spoke of. Yes, sir, you had a question.
I'm Dr. Vishnu Paningre from Fortis. Just to ENY, in fact, we heard about Dr. Berry speaking about agriculture, education, and health. And on the health part, like we have gone out with the Ayushman Bharat and all that, our data, still we are not working seamlessly. It's working in silos. What I'm trying to say is that there's a humongous amount of data across the country. So ENY, they help the FICCI, I'm part of the FICCI Health Services Committee also, to give the report in a way that there's a seamless sort of collaboration, which Dr. Anup Purohit mentioned in the morning, in the earlier session, that collaboration should happen, that what are the data points that need to be captured in that for the patient data, because that will help us in looking at the disease prevalence, because all our data that the books that we read, it is Western data. So the Indian data, like Dr. Berry rightly mentioned, Indian patients, Indian data must come in. So I think that this is something that we need to look at. I request ENY to sort of take this forward. Thank you.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more on this. And as an individual, I've got my health record lying in the systems of 2 or 3 different hospitals. And what I really want to do as an individual is to collate all of them when I have anything and go to a doc and say, sir, this is my history for the last 10, 12 years, basically, which is there. How the various parameters have this thing. And I absolutely agree. I think the healthcare data need to be consolidated. There needs to be interoperability, which is there within the system, which is not left to the person who manages the system. They are the patient's records, basically, which are there. And if we can collate a lot of the data, put it together, then maybe, some AI system sees some markers with some diseases or something, which is there, and, make it more effective. So I'd say I absolutely agree with what you're saying.
We don't actually have a question. We have an answer for you also coming in.
Sorry, thank you. So I lead the public health for EY. So just to answer your question, I think fundamentally, Indian government has done a lot. We all know about Ayushman Bharat digital mission, where the, rails for digital enablement have been put out. It's a digital public infrastructure. And it will be equivalent to the kind of thing that we have seen in financial sector, where we have seen UPI. We have something very similar coming up as UHI. But that will involve a lot of hospitals, ecosystem labs, everybody to adopt this whole ABDM. And as soon as it happens, we'll see interoperability between the electronic medical records. And to answer your question, sir, I think there are 3 elements. First is that we are seeing benefits of AI for rural India. For example, whether it is detection of tuberculosis. So systems have been trained on that, different kinds of cuffs have been done on that. Simple, at scale can be done. Similarly, we have seen for child mortality. Now we had issues with the weighing scale. Now you can take a picture and get to a weight, Vadvani and all of that done. So all of these we are seeing happening where we are seeing solutions being developed for India using AI. The other is, for institutions like yours, you have, the data that you have, all longitudinal, latitudinal data that you have for the patients. The amount of research that you can do with your data in itself is amazing for the institution you come up. And third, of course, and all the research that you have. And third is this whole DPI that we have put out in India.
Thank you very much for contributing and joining in. That was the idea of doing this in a different format, was to make this far more interactive and get comments and questions in and get our panel to answer them. Yes, sir, you have a question.
Hello, sir. My name is DK Srivastava. I'm into IT industry for last 30 years. Sir, I have a question over AI. I think now AI is rather than requirement, it's a fashion. Everywhere, everybody wants to put my product is AI enabled, whether it is required or not. And don't you think so that we are generating a Bhasmasur from AI? I'm telling you a situation, sir. Suppose my car is AI enabled and someone has hacked. Then what will happen? Where my steering won't work, brake won't work, and will met with an accident. Who will be responsible for that? So I think now the time has come when government should draw a line where the AI is required and where it is not required. Wherever it is not required, it should not be allowed to do any work in AI. It's just like the atomic power. Atomic power, we got it. Whether through atomic power, we can generate energy, and through atomic power, we can make atom bomb, which can destroy countries and countries. So I think AI is a good thing, but there should be we may face a challenge. I think most of you have seen a movie, Robot. What will happen at the end when the robot will control the man? So the time has come, we should think over. Thank you.
Absolutely
thank you.
Agreed.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I would strongly recommend all of us here to go through Harari's Nexus. Now, these are absolutely apt points which have been raised by him. So let's not get swayed. It has to be a calibrated approach. It has to be a regulated approach. The gentleman has given a very, very appropriate example of nuclear power. If it had not got into NPTs, even in the Cold War, there was an arrangement and it saved the world for decades. It's a monster. It has to be calibrated. It has to be managed. Then only it's going to generate the dividends that we are aspiring for.
No, absolutely. And I wonder if anybody else wants to come in on this, because I think I'll come to Neha. Neha, go ahead, and then I'll come to you, Bharat Sal, as well.
Just a very small point here. I mean, there's just so much change that's happening in the world of work and, the world that we live in, that just standing still is probably the fastest way of moving backwards, in this fast-changing world. So completely agree that there needs to be, guardrails and a lot more legislation and regulation around it, but not doing anything or waiting for somebody else to, crack the code probably is not the answer today.
Yeah, that clearly is not the answer, and it's a technology that's already out there and being put to use. So I think how you regulate it, are there areas that you, and whether you can actually stop the use of it in certain areas or not, and how much can you regulate it, I think those are going to be the important questions to answer as well. Bharat-san, you wanted to come in on this?
Yes, I mean, I think we have, all questions this evening have been when we have not imagined the memory of AI and the role of the bots. I mean, this question of seamlessness, whether it's not just about healthcare, about education and payments and agriculture. I mean, you will not need exams and classes because you would have actually
You'd have very happy students.
you would have created digital ledgers of where somebody's reached and where the capability sets are. I mean, it is, but at the same time, the point that Neha said, you know, it's between pioneering spirit and harmony. How do you draw an equilibrium? If you ask any global economy, whether it's my company or anyone, this is the question, that how do I define, I mean, we are talking of 2047, how do I define 2035 or 2030? It's that responsibility of handling free flow of data with trust and yet be a pioneering leader in delivering solutions first is humongous challenge. Some of these things will automatically come out because once there is memory and the bots are talking to each other, whether it is in the markets or it is in healthcare or education, each individual is getting mapped, not because you have to enter data anymore.
Yeah.
You're talking of an environment where we are very fast moving towards, where data will capture its own data. Everything is a sensor and a bot.
Yes.
So that's what my Chennai example was. I mean, the elevator, the ticket turnstile, the infotainment, the CCTV, everything about the passenger and the asset class. So when I said we're learning how this is possible to monetize on one side, but how much can we control it really?
Absolutely, and in many ways it changes the business model in itself. Sarup, you wanted to come in.
I think, Shireen, especially for two countries, China and India, the relevance of data is very large. Where we are different is we have to understand we are biometrically identified. So what data can do to us is unimaginable. And this large data is not possible for humans to sort of tackle. It will need engines at the back end to look at it unbiased and in an unemotional way to give us the right example. Going forward, I think the new factor that will emerge is what we call sentiment score. Sentiment will no longer remain an emotion, it will turn into a number. And instead of asking a local palmist or anything, if you start asking AI engines, they'll probably give us a far more predictive answer through a sentiment score, which is backed by data. And if you start using it properly, a lot of good can happen for a country like us, which is aspiring to move at a faster rate to catch up with other countries. So, of course, I completely agree with Sir. And make no mistake, when those things arise, the rightful regulations will come in. I have no doubt or debate on that. I mean, it always comes in. But don't underestimate the power or the need for data to be cleaned up. I mean, Nilesh Bhai said that, you need the right data. At this moment, the data that is in front of us is a lot of noise. A new industry, a new education system, a new job profile will emerge in this cleaning of data to make it right. Once it is right, what it can do for our entire environment to change over a period of a short time is unimaginable.
Well, and we're trying to get a sense of what this new future looks like. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Sunil K. I have a different question to ask about, and that's about the sustainability of the planet. The whole gamut of AI that we've been talking about is actually an energy guzzler. And here we are talking of, net zero emission targets till 2030. Until 2070, we're talking about net zero emission. And what I gather, if for us to achieve that, we need to increase our production, electricity production capacity 5-fold. And my question is, on one hand, we're talking about planet and, all that cloud burst and all that is happening. And on the other hand, we are using technology which is going to be consuming a huge amount of energy, which I hear is also going to make it unviable from the point of view of setting up data centers, a whole lot of it. So have we taken this aspect, E&Y, jobs, blah, blah, into account, that the pace at which it will grow and the pace at which it will require the energy production to increase, are we going to nullify that, or are we going to land up into something else altogether?
No, but again, a very valid concern and a very valid issue that you raise here. In fact, it was a very interesting conversation that I was having with the chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation, and one of the insights that came from him is that, you know, when you're setting up these large data centers, should technology companies, the Microsofts, Amazons of the world, then be looking at setting up renewable capacity, or at least helping people set up renewable capacity in some form of public-private partnership as well? And perhaps those will be questions that we will need answers to. But any thoughts here on the panel? Atul, go ahead.
So definitely it's a very, very apt concern. It's an energy guzzler, and you have seen all these large players, whether you look at Microsoft, you look at Google, they're all setting up nuclear plants, mini nuclear plants. It's not only an energy guzzler, it's also a huge water guzzler. And when we're looking at creating this kind of an ecosystem in India, somehow we have not applied our minds that how that hardware infrastructure will be created in India. What kind of data centers? Are they going to be energy efficient? Is the power going to be available? Is the water going to be available?
Yeah.
So it has to be a holistic approach. And we better do it through renewable sources. Otherwise, we're heading for another big problem.
No, absolutely, and I think that is a justifiable concern. Rajneesh, go ahead.
So I'd say two things. One is that the big tech players in the US are also looking at nuclear energy as a way of putting the power. So I think people are quite sensitive about all these things. The second thing is there's a lot of innovation which is going on around the world, how to have chips which will be more efficient in terms of using the natural resources and everything. So if you take a static picture which is there, it looks very scary. But I think if
You're saying things are evolving.
Yeah, if you have faith in human innovation, then they'll see.
And we need to have faith in human innovation. I think that's the only way to progress, but while also being mindful of the associated risks and challenges and ensuring that we do have enough of the checks and balances in place. Ashutosh, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, so, see, with any development, there will be need for energy. I mean, our world will need that. But that's a separate question. Now, that does not mean that we can't have growth on AI. I mean, if it is going to help the humankind. So, that's a separate topic of how we are going to bring this energy from where we are going to get it from. So, if we are going to get a clean energy, we are going to get it from solar, we are going to get it from a green hydrogen, then that's the way forward for, humankind to grow.
Well, yes, all of those will have to be things that we look at. Yes. No. Yes. One last question. There's a gentleman right there at the back. I'm going to try and move very quickly across to you. Yes, sir. If you can stand up, it'll be easier for them to be able to spot you.
Thank you. My two questions, short. One is that what do we do with the culture prevailing in our Asian countries, including India, that we want to hide uncomfortable data. So that is one. Second is why there is no gender parity in AI research. I mean, why there are so few ladies in that?
No, that's not just an AI issue. That's a larger issue. We need to have more women. And I'm so glad that we at least have Neha trying to do her bit as far as...
no, because one woman is good enough for 6 men. That's why.
That without a doubt. But we do definitely need to have more women. But, good point that you made there. I don't know. Who wants to take the data question?
I think, first of all, let's realize that once we are on this, we are already outside. There is nothing to hide. I mean, there are two types of data according to me. One is your financial data. Once you say okay to your mobile net banking, you don't need the internet for your data to be out. Your mobile provider sends you every amount of debit or credit that goes out. So you're not on the smartphone or internet for your data to have gone. It's already out there. The other uncomfortable data, if you want to hide, and I don't want to spell it out, there's no way of hiding anymore. I mean, let's be very clear. It's a public place. You are there. And once you have your location on here, everybody knows that all of us are here. And we have to grapple and live with that. And that's the new world. There is nothing called privacy anymore. You might sign something, but everybody knows that this is where we are right now. And that's the new world. And there's nothing wrong with that. Is progression. How we adapt to that will define how we are comfortable in our minds with it.
You know, and that's an important topic. We've got the secretary coming in shortly, so we will address the issue of privacy or the lack of it in a bit. But let me, you want to make a point before we?
No,
yeah.
just a very quick one. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, there is more on the table. While green energy for data centers and all of that is there, there is data itself, the traceability of what is real, precise domain data versus all that is clubbed together. So there will be segregation, data will move into vector formats, but there will be another spend coming with quantum communication.
Yeah.
That today the architecture cannot support the flow of this very high-speed information that we would have done by high-speed computing. How will it reach finally the last mile?
Yeah.
So there will be energy spends, but we are not mapping it against the energy saved for that much acceleration that growth would otherwise ordinarily deliver without AI. So you'll also save a lot of energy because it's going to be a quantum leap. And but yes, there are genuine concerns. The GX-DX matrix really always throws up this thing that there will be an upsurge of this demand and supply gap that will raise the price and make it unaffordable. But we need to get to green energy equally with the same amount as we adopt intelligent tools.
So we've got the last couple of minutes. I want to address each one of you with the very same question. Over the next 5 years, I'll start with you, Atul Lal. How do you see the organization, the complexion of the organization changing, both in terms of process and people on account of the use of technology?
So I reiterate, it'll be younger. Gut would go out. It'll be more data focused. And there'll be a separate, because we're not discussing the hardware part. A separate hardware infrastructure would be required by every organization. It's not only data to support and analyze it. We'll have manufacturing quality deliverable reducing from 500 odd ppm to 3.4 ppm. Six Sigma would be an automatic thing. Customer satisfaction would be of a different order. New products to launch would be much, much, much faster. So I think it's going to be transformative, undoubtedly. And it's all going to be good. The only thing is that it needs to be calibrated.
So, Swaroop, the 5-year roadmap?
Yeah, I think on the age, if you take out me, Nilesh Surana, our CIO, and Jaju, our CIO det, the age in our organization drops below 30. It's already there in front of us. 40% are women, just to answer Sir's question.
That's good news.
So that's how the demography is playing out. But on the data, I think the first part we've started is cleaning up all data and making each data into an outputable format. And that will take some time. We put a year to that. Once that is there, then we can fetch anything we want about anything. That will what will make us powerful, from a customer sentiment data to the emails that they're writing, whether it's the urgency of that, to analysis of each company will change completely, and the pace at which things will work will stand permanently renewed is what we are looking forward to.
So transformative, not just for the organization, but also for the economy in the next 5 years, Nilesh Bhai?
Surely, we'll all remember Charles Darwin. It's not the mighty who survive, it's the adaptive who will survive.
Yes, and adaptability and agility will, of course, continue to be critical as we move forward. Bharat sir?
It has the potential to upset the equilibrium between cosmos and quantum. So you can't run away from it, you have to adopt to it, but you have to be very, very responsible. And that consciousness of responsibility has to be brought in the mainstream.
Ashutosh?
See, from my perspective, we are going to see a lot of workforce transformation over next 5 years. Because roadmap to skill making in AI is not going to be same thing like what we did with software, because software is a direct skill programming, which has been much easier. But AI need a lot more logic, and which is difficult to find. And our education system also does not provide much of it. So whole transformation over next 5 years of the workforce, reskilling them, and also of our education system will be a dominant theme. That is one. Second thing will be within companies, there will be a culture of adaptation. Now that companies will have to adapt that culture of, will have to go through that culture of adaptation, which will be a big challenge for the HR leaders in the company and also the business leaders in the company. Because people will have to learn to adapt to use the technology themselves, number one, and then have the mindset as to how am I going to use the technology for to create value add for my client, for my customers. So these are the two dominant things that will happen.
You know, that's a good segue for me to ask each one of you, how much of AI are you personally using? I mean, how many apps do you use on a daily basis? I'll start with you, Ashutosh.
No, so in our business, we use AI. We have started using AI because our recruitment system that we uses AI. So one of the very, quick use for us is that, when we do a 1 hour of assessment call with our candidates, how AI is able to generate the summary of it, immediately after the call, instead of writing notes and then putting it down. So one very, very good use case for us is that.
Okay. Atulal, how are you using AI personally?
So in our case is the real-time information of the manufacturing lines. We have 20 factories, 30,000 workers, more than 500 manufacturing lines. So if you're able to do the real-time data analysis and intervene where the things are not going wrong, yeah, it's a game changer for us.
But you personally?
Yeah, there is a screen, there's a dashboard in front of me.
Bharat-san?
There is...
ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Secretary of MeitY, Mr. Krishnan. Thank you very much. You're coming in at the fag end of our conversation where I was asking about how they're personally using AI to be lifelong learners.
It's become part of everyday life, both at work and at play.
At work and at play?
Well, my AI just pinged me, don't reveal the secret, otherwise Shireen will not call you again.
Sarup?
No, I got taught how to use ChatGPT by my son, but I have started using Copilot myself, and we're training our entire organization on Copilot as we speak.
Okay, that's perfect. Rajneesh?
I use AI all the time. One of the good ones is to use Llama on your WhatsApp. So any quick research that you need, you get it actually.
Well, that's a good hack, and that's a good tip there coming in from Rajneesh. I'm going to give the final say to you, Neha, we're saving the best for the last.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, besides the fact that we do a lot of consulting work for clients where you have to use AI, but let me say that this study that EY did leveraged AI quite well. So
well, and kudos to the team at EY for that. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to our panel for not just giving us a very macro view of what the world could potentially look like in the next 5 to 10 years on the back of AI, but also what they're doing individually within their own organizations. One thing is very, very clear. Leadership roles are going to change dramatically. Workflow and work processes are going to change dramatically. And people, that will, of course, be a challenge, but also an opportunity for companies to look at as we look at the use of intelligence in the next 5 to 10 years. Once again, many, many thanks to our panel for joining us here this evening.
Thank you so much. But I'll request our panelists to stay with us. Shireen, can I now request you to join us on stage? Ladies and gentlemen, we can have a louder round of applause as we thank Shireen for that very, very interactive session and, of course, for the insightful conversations that we had with our panelists. Could I request Shireen and our panelists to come together so that we could get a lovely group picture, please? And we would request Shireen to offer a small token to our lovely panelists as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shireen. Thank you to our lovely panelists. Always a pleasure listening to each one of you. I must say that this has been one of the most engaging shows that I've hosted in the recent time. Such good questions from the audience, such insightful data that has come from the audience. So I want to say a big thank you to each one of you to make it so engaging, for making it so interactive. But ladies and gentlemen, as we now move to a very, very crucial and significant moment as part of today's show, as part of today's evening. We spoke about this when I started the show earlier, but ladies and gentlemen, that moment really has now come. In a short while from now, we're going to see the official release of the AIdea report 2025. This report, ladies and gentlemen, will provide a comprehensive overview of the current landscape of AI in India, but most importantly, will highlight the opportunities and challenges that we face today in realizing the true potential or the full potential of GenAI. And for that, I'd like to invite Shireen back on stage, but with that, two special guests as well. Join me in welcoming, with a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, S. Krishnan, the Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, who's been very kind enough to take out the time and join us. Also join me in welcoming, ladies and gentlemen, Mahesh Makhija, Technology Consulting Leader at AIdea India, as he joins our other guests to officially release this report, please. What we're going to now officially see is the release of this report, ladies and gentlemen. Could I request our guests to officially release the report, please? All our guests to stay on stage with us, because ladies and gentlemen, we're now moving towards the last fireside conversation for this evening, which is called Charting India's Gen AI Future. I'll leave the rest to Shireen and to our lovely guests, please.
Thank you very much. Mahesh and Mr. Krishnan, please take a seat. And thank you so much for being here and doing the honors this evening. We've had a fascinating couple of conversations so far. That's fine, I'll keep it with me. This evening, where we've talked about the use cases across different sectors, different industries, the early adopters, where we find ourselves on skills, where we find ourselves on hardware, and so on and so forth. But Mahesh, before I get Mr. Krishnan to comment on how the government is looking at things and some of the challenges that we just spoke of, you know, what to your mind from this report really stands out as far as India's AI future is concerned?
Yeah. So I think the report, and we've spoken about it through the day, I think it gives a bird's eye view of where we are from a GenAI perspective in India. So there is a snapshot of the current state of play. Adoption levels are, you know, we discussed 15%, but could trend higher. But huge amount of optimism in terms of enterprises, the government, consumers, you know, to start to adopt AI, and that's being driven by a large ecosystem of providers. So that's one deep dive in the report. I think there's a section on the jobs report, which we spoke about earlier. So, you know, productivity improvements to the tune of almost 2.5% by 2030, which is, you know, pretty large. So there's a deep dive of that. And then there's a section on what are the trends in India itself. And there are 3 or 4 trends which we've highlighted in the report. One is this whole area of the Indic AI ecosystem. Yeah. LLMs itself, many companies starting to create Indic LLMs, you know, but beyond that, this whole agentic stuff, which is, you know, hype right now, but we have startups providing very India-specific agents, and that's again going to change the nature of, you know, work. Last but not the least, it is the entire India stack. Yeah. Which is a great role model. Digital is been transformed with that in the country, but now is the role of AI and how that will get embedded into different parts of the India stack. So that's those are some of the big trends which we've highlighted in the report.
Well, let me get Mr. Krishnan to address some of those big trends, but let's start with the issue of skilling, Mr. Krishnan, because I know that you had a meeting with Satya Nadella and he's inked a pact with METI to skill people in India, especially people across rural parts of India. How critical is that going to be, and how much momentum do you believe we need to put in place there to really address the capability building aspect as we enter an intelligent era?
I think skilling is extremely important in the Indian context. I think it's important from a number of perspectives. Number one, India has a huge opportunity to leverage AI in terms of developing applications, not just for use in the country itself, but for the rest of the world. And for that, you need skilled human resources. Second, of course, at the upper end of this whole debate in terms of what is being talked about, developing models within India, foundational models within India. And for that, you need a different order, higher set of skills, and that's an important element of work. But I think the most important thing is how you can actually use AI to enhance your own productivity and so on is something that people should approach with confidence. And that's where, training in rural areas and using it for various productivity enhancing features in, say, agriculture or healthcare would involve people knowing how to use the tool. And I know that people do adapt to these things very quickly, and Indians have proved to be great adopters of technology, and we've demonstrated that time and again. But a little bit of training, a little bit of skilling, and exposure to what these tools could really do will go a long way. And which is why in the skilling space, really, it's all hands on deck. We are taking whatever help we can get from every possible source, because it's a big job, it's a big country. And
yes, it is a big job and a big country. But, I want to address the issue of the productivity uplift that we've been talking about. And Eva's actually put a number there. And, and Mahesh was explaining to us some of the factors that have gone into putting that number. What's the assumption that you're working with within government, or what this could potentially mean in terms of an economy-wide productivity uplift, in terms of what it adds to growth in the next 5 to 10 years? Is there one?
Well, I mean, we are looking at numbers which have been put together by a range of, including EY and their peers across the market. There's one number which talks about $967 billion by 2035. That is the addition to GDP that AI can do, and so on. So there are different numbers of that kind which have been put together, and your colleague didn't give me a chance to even glance through the report that quickly to figure out what numbers have been put in this particular report. But I think more than that, it's really the opportunity and how we use it. It's the potential, and the potential, I think everyone understands, is substantial, and it needs to get used. But I'd like to highlight a slightly different aspect, which is that in the Indian context, I mean, there's a productivity enhancing tool which you can use in a regular office environment in terms of, how you get your normal work done and spare people for other tasks in a white collar environment. But it could really make a very, very big difference when you're talking about a manufacturing environment, or you're talking about a healthcare environment and so on. And that's where I think it'll make the critical difference. And for that, more work is needed, and that's what, under the India AI mission, we'll be looking to do.
I'll ask you about the India AI mission in just a second, but Mahesh, let me address some of those issues. Let's talk about AI in the context of India's challenges and population scale challenges that we need to address, and many of the areas where we continue to be constrained on account of either the lack of capital or the lack of capacity, whether it's healthcare or it's education. I mean, what could be the transformative, the game-changing impact over the next 5 to 10 years if we were to deploy and use this rightly?
I think, see, the transformation is going to be at several levels, right? I think first is in terms of access. The whole Indic LLM approach today is very focused, and we'll have to see how far it goes, on just language, vernacular, making sure that, you can access, or India 2, India 3 can access AI to make their lives better. That
Yeah.
could be healthcare, it could be, financial services, inclusion, it could be government services. So I think that's one whole level at which the transformation will happen. A lot of the excluded populations who are coming into the digital space will now accelerate and be able to make, and have better lives. So that's one part of it. Then you switch over and you look at corporates and what that's going to mean to corporates. I think the world of work is going to change pretty significantly. We've discussed almost 24% of tasks being eliminated. That's a lot, right? You could take like customer service, we've discussed it so much. L1 customer service will probably get eliminated. But, I think it's going to be the augmentation and then the amplification where I think there's going to be a big change in how people work. That's another, big mode at which things will begin to change. And then I think from an India perspective overall, you discussed GDP growth, etc. But there's a whole space of new industries which we can't even imagine, which will come to life. Those will primarily be AI first, digital driven industries. That's going to have a massive impact on our country. So I think at these three different levels, the consumer, the corporate, and then the whole space of new industries, I think that's where the promise really is. And
to go from a promise to actual proof, let's talk about some of the critical enablers that we will need to put in place. And let's start by talking about the computational power. And of course, the government has a target of 10,000 GPUs, but is that going to be enough to kind of, marry the objectives that we have across the economy? And what do you believe that we're going to have to do in order for us to compete with the likes of China, etc., which are far ahead already in the AI race?
I think at the time when the AI mission was put together, the number was stated as at least 10,000. I mean, the idea is not to restrict ourselves to 10,000. Clearly, we can go beyond. And where we stand today is that in the first bid that we put out, the first RFP which we put out, we've been offered in excess of 20,000 GPU. And of course, finally, when the bids get finalized, we'll have to see how much stays on the table. So clearly, there is appetite and there's capacity in the private sector in India to actually make those investments and create that much of capacity. And we would like to encourage that as we go along. So it depends entirely on the kind of users it gets put to and how much actually gets deployed. Nobody is in a position right now to actually estimate the market very precisely, but everyone is trying to sort of zero in on a number. But interestingly enough, the other big element which is important here is the data center requirement and the power requirement to address
we were talking about that.
this need. And that is where I think, again, we are putting in a lot of focus to understand where exactly this capacity will come up, where there would be sufficient power which is available, and where the data centers can really come up and support this kind of capacity. Currently, we have about 1,000 megawatts worth of data center capacity in the country. It's growing. It needs to grow further. And I think a greater understanding among state governments and others saying that this is something which needs to be facilitated and encouraged because of the strategic importance is something which is a message that we are giving them and we are talking to them about. So that's one critical element. The infrastructure build-out has to happen, and the infrastructure build-out necessarily has to be in India. Now, if we overshoot, then there is a possibility that we would be able to offer this capacity to other countries around the world. There could be many other countries which do not or which are not in a position to actually make that investment. If we do actually overshoot, then we can offer that capacity elsewhere. In fact, the United Nations Under-Secretary General was here last week. And we had this conversation and he said, would you be prepared? Would India be ready to do that? I said, look, we have to first meet our requirements first. And it is difficult to estimate the demand today, and we will make these investments. Right now, many users in this country are accessing AI compute elsewhere in the world. So there's no reason why, if we are able to build out the kind of compute infrastructure we are looking for, and if there is additional capacity which is available, why we won't share it with the rest of the world.
Okay.
So we are, I mean, I think higher investments in the space won't go wrong. That is the point I'm trying to make, because a lot of the private sector has this hesitation of making that investment because they are unsure of what the market is. What the government has tried to do initially is to underwrite a portion of the market, and that's how the investment comes in. And beyond that, there are possibilities where it can be supplied elsewhere too.
Supplied elsewhere also. But, I wanted to understand from you, since Mahesh was talking about the focus on Indic models and Bhashini in specific, what have been the early learnings from Bhashini, and how do you see that evolving now as we move forward? Mr. Krishna? Yeah. No, he made the reference.
Okay. No, I think our experience with Bhashini has been so far quite good, and it's constantly improving. It's something that we are working on all the time, and it's constantly improving. And we believe that, that really offers potential of having what we would call an inclusive AI in the country. Because there are two elements to it which is important. One element is it's in the local language, and the second element is that it is oral or it is spoken word. It's the spoken word. And people would feel much more comfortable accessing with the spoken word instead of having to type. Even someone who's not very comfortable typing, not very comfortable writing, would be able to speak into a phone and indicate what their requirements are. So I think from that perspective, we found that applications are growing all the time. And it's been an open ecosystem where we have supported a number of startups, and there are a lot of other private sector companies who also come in and work with us in this space. Already in about 12 languages, it's fairly well established in base. We'll eventually go to 22, which are all the languages in the 7th schedule and in the 8th schedule, and eventually possibly even more.
Okay, so that's the roadmap as far as where Bhashini could head. But let me get you into the conversation that has occupied mind space over the last few days. That's because the government is finally, after 18 months, put out the rules on the privacy legislation. And there's both sides of the debate that's being argued at this point in time. Industry saying there's over-regulation and the government is going too far. And there are many others on the consumer side that believe that the rules are ambiguous, that the consumer is being shortchanged. Are you going to, extend the period of consultation to start with? And how are you looking at the feedback that's coming in both from industry as well as from the advocacy groups who are saying that you've shortchanged the consumer?
Very early in my civil service career, I learned one thing, which is that if both sides of a debate are abusing you, then you're most probably right. Because, if neither party is happy with you, then you've displeased both of them the right amount to make sure that you're...
Who do you believe you've displeased more? Who do you believe you've displeased more?
I don't think, in this case, fortunately, what I read of the debate and what I see of it in newspapers and elsewhere is that, okay, there are, valid points that a number of people are making, but there are some, practical considerations and pragmatic considerations also which go into this. Not everything can be spelt out right in the beginning. This is, after all, you're dealing with an emerging technology. We do not really know what every possibility is, and we need to have that flexibility in approach, and we need to sort of do it on the basis, and the basic attempt here is to do it on the basis of certain principles and outcomes, and not on a basis of certain prescriptive, put down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a checklist, because you can sort of achieve the checklist, but lose out on the ultimate objective of what you were trying to do. That is the risk. That is one risk. And the second point there is that even companies who ask us for that maybe would be able to design technological mechanisms which are far better than what we can actually prescribe today, and they can actually give us a way out of actually achieving the objective in a much simpler way or in a much more effective way through use of technology. Yeah. So I think multiple possibilities are there for which we have left space. And the way that we have defended citizens and defended those stakeholders is fundamentally by saying that we are not compromising on the end principle, which stays paramount, and which is what which is the test which will be applied eventually, whether the significant or the data fiduciary has actually done enough to achieve that goal. I think that is something we'll have to discover over time. This is new legislation in a new space, in a space where there's been no legislation at all of this kind. And we have to find that balance.
So
and it will take a
you
while.
believe the rule making will be, a dynamic process? It will be work in progress? I mean, this is the first raft, so to speak, and you will build on this based on real world experience?
No, I think, I don't mean that. The rules, of course, can undergo change, which is why we are doing a public consultation. If there is something which is really problematic or really an issue or which needs to be sort of modified or changed, we are, of course, prepared to do it. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is the Act and the rules direct you in a particular direction, send you in a particular direction with an end objective in mind, without actually plotting out every step along the way, saying this is what you need to do, because even the government today is not 100% sure that this is exactly the path that you need to take to get to the objective that you're trying to achieve in terms of data privacy and so on. There might be better ways of doing it. Technology might offer better opportunities of doing it. So we'll try to get there by whatever means, but we will get to that final objective. And the test that a fiduciary needs to meet in order to get there is what is sort of prescribed, and not the steps that he will actually take.
Mahesh, you want to come in on
Yeah,
on
I
this?
just think it makes sense not to be prescriptive, sir, exactly like you're saying. And, given that it's an evolving space, adopt that approach where you're going to see how it operates and then make the changes. I think there are some areas where you've opened up consultation, which is on consent and localization, algorithms and how they'll operate, etc. I think I'm sure you will get a ton of feedback. We are preparing to, put in our own thoughts.
They're already getting plenty.
Exactly.
So are you extending the public consultation?
See, we have more than a month to go, and we can always, depends on what comes in, and and the point is, this is the period that you permit for people to come in with their inputs.
Yeah.
After the inputs come in, then we'll have to sit down with it and digest it. So it's not as if the day the public consultation ends, the next day we will notify what needs to come.
Well, speaking of things on the anvil, we've got the budget coming up, and there's a big ask from industry for a component PLI, and with a significant allocation for a component PLI as well. I mean, what's your take, given the fact that this is also an opportunity that presents itself in the global context for India today?
I mean, I'd only say that if I was only shooting for the component PLI, then, it's
so
very unambitious.
What else are you shooting for?
We're shooting for a whole lot more than a component PLI, I can assure you.
So let's start with the component PLI. What are you shooting for there, and what else are you shooting for?
I mean, honestly, the point is that at this point in time, I can only tell you that I'm shooting for all this. What comes out of it is part of a decision making which is above my pay grade, literally. There's things which have to be approved by cabinet and approved by the ministry and so on. So I can't get into the specifics of how it'll go. But I think truly this year is an opportunity for the digital economy as a whole and digital technology as a whole, and also a significant opportunity in the space of electronics and semiconductors for the country. And I think what we'll be pushing for is a bold set of measures and a bold set of support for pushing the...
Tariff reduction, part of the package that you're sending as your wish list?
You see, I've been part of budget processes before, and I know exactly how this goes. And so there's only so much in terms of what I would volunteer as information of saying that we are being ambitious. From MeitY, we are being ambitious. And, wish us luck. That's all I will tell you.
Well, okay, we do wish you luck, and we've got to wait until the 1st of February to know how your powers of persuasion eventually work. But, I wanted to get your feedback on some reportage that's come in on how China seems to be restricting the mobility of people as well as the mobility of components to factories present in India, the likes of Foxconn, etc. Are you getting that feedback? Is the government cognizant of it?
The government is cognizant of it. I think this kind of feedback has been coming to us from companies for a few weeks now, and we are aware of this. We have internally also discussed this in the government. I mean, understandably, China is probably, I mean, I don't think you should look at it as something that somebody is directing it against us specifically. I think it
But you do believe that this is government intervention?
It could potentially be. I mean, this is what companies are telling us, that, you know, export of capital goods in some senses is getting constrained. And so far, I mean, the issue on visas and so on is that, you know, there's a process of approval of visas for people coming from China, which we are following. But we have not come across situations where somebody has applied for a visa, granted a visa, did not travel, or those kind of issues haven't come up yet, or you know, somebody withdrew an application for visa. There are occasional cases like that. But companies are telling us that they sense certain restrictions being placed on them. Formally, there is nothing that we have formally heard. It is mostly feedback from companies. But
have the restrictions been placed formally as well, or is that more sort of word of mouth, nudging companies to do something or not do something?
We have not received anything in writing. I mean, I think it is something which is being said to the counterpart companies on the other side. This is what, and there's no public announcement of this. Some of it could also be sort of the Chinese side trying to prepare for what happens after January 20th. So we don't know, and I don't think we should necessarily interpret this as something which is directed
at India specifically.
At India specifically. I think it is something which is directed at all locations which could potentially be the China plus one locations.
So how concerned would you be with what is happening at this point in time? And if there were to be a further escalation of these restrictions, how much could that derail the story that we're building out with some degree of success over the last 2 years?
See, I mean, some part of it is clearly something which has to come out of China. Because you see, it's not just Chinese companies, but it is also, say, American companies or Taiwanese companies which are currently operating in China. So they have, you know, human resources there which need to come in here, which is where we typically ask for visas and so on. Sometimes the capital equipment supply is out of China. So just as you build China plus one in the final supply chain, you will have to build it upstream as well. It might become more difficult, but it can't be the only option. Then you'll have to look at, you know, where the Chinese learnt it from in the first place.
One of the other, things on your table, and I would imagine on the government's table as a whole, is of course Semicon, and what happens to Semicon 2.0 in terms of both ambition, in terms of audacity, in terms of the kind of plans that you put forward for yourselves.
I think the overall assessment we have on Semicon is that you know, the first phase of it has been quite successful in terms of delivering the momentum that we expected, getting in the right kind of companies. But clearly we need more, because there need to be more companies which have to come in and be prepared to invest in India, particularly more fabs that we need. Probably, you know, we have 4 in the first 5 which have been approved. There's 1 fab and 4 OSATs. Then we need somebody who needs to come in on the display fab side. We need companies to come in on compound semiconductors. All of these areas are spaces which we are still looking at. And so the story is not done in the semiconductor space. More has to happen. The Prime Minister in Semicon India made it fairly clear that government support to the semiconductor sector will continue. The Minister for Electronics and Information Technology went on record that we will have a follow-up program. We are working on the follow-up program, and we hope to launch it.
So a status check on the AI mission in terms of what has been delivered so far in terms of outcomes, and more importantly, what you prioritize through 2025.
In 2025, I think there's a fair amount of work which needs to happen in the AI mission, and this would probably be the most exciting year. I already mentioned briefly about what is happening on the AI compute story. That RFP has done well, and that would be a rolling sort of process where every 3 to 6 months we will keep adding newer companies who come in and newer capacity which comes on stream. and we'll keep updating it.
How much capacity will we have on stream in terms of compute in 2025?
As I told you that the initial offer from the 19 companies put together is north of 20,000 GPUs. So we'll have to really look at what more comes on. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, all 20,000 may not get finally realized because, people may back out or may not agree to the pricing or something. So we'll have to see what fructifies, and then we'll keep adding thereafter. And so we are reasonably confident that we should hit the initial goal of at least 10,000, and then
in 2025
and build on that. The second part of the story is really on the AI applications, which I think is really where the rubber hits the road, because that's where you will see impact. So there are 25 sets of applications which we are trying to create. There are 14 problem statements which were put out, and we've got about 900 responses in the first round, which closed in December and which are being currently evaluated, and we've put out the second round as well right now. We are in the process of consulting there. So all that put together should also give us substantially more applications which we can put out. The other stream of work which is going fairly well is what we want to do on safe and trusted AI. We've got 8 projects which we've awarded on various tools which can be used to ensure safety and trust in the AI space. And in addition, we put out the report of the subcommittee chaired by the Principal Scientific Advisor on the governance framework, and we have comments coming in on that as well, which will sort of guide the way that the governance framework goes. The training part has also been kicked off, and in addition to supporting colleges and institutions to establish PhDs and MTechs and BTechs, we've also started building out the AI labs, the data labs in polytechnics and ITIs. Now that's again where it's really practical hands-on stuff, where we are training, people who will work with data, make it more usable for AI purposes. That's going to be an important job opportunity. And so that process we believe is critical. And that's where many jobs will also be. So that's an important step. Then the AI, the building of the foundation model, that took a little while to really take off, and we will be sort of putting it out this year, primarily because of the debate on whether we should focus.
Or you shouldn't. Yeah.
So I think finally...
But now it's very clear that you should.
Now it's not either or. I mean, I think there were people who were saying, why do you want to do a language model of your own, or why do you want to do a foundational model of your own? Just focus on applications. But the AI mission right from the beginning had both. And so we did a quick round of consultations. We said, okay, we need to fine-tune this, because please remember that right in the beginning, we never said that it will be a large language model. We've always maintained it will be a foundational model and a multimodal model, because we realize the importance of visual data, of spoken data, and so on. And so the model could include all of these, and the INDIC models that he referred to are important developments which we can support and which we've started supporting. So definitely that will be an important area of work, and we'll also look at something which is sector specific, because it's only the sector specific models which we believe will be able to deliver the productivity enhancements.
Which sectors will you focus on?
We will focus, at least to begin with, on education, healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture.
So 4.
Possibly. These 4 definitely, and possibly more, based on the kind of requirements that we have. And so these, then of course there is this whole area of innovation and how we support startups in this space, and there's a fairly large allocation for that. That again, the work is already commenced, so we are sort of expanding the various existing and newer accelerators and incubators which we support in this space, so that we are able to offer them more support, because clearly AI, both in terms of applications and what could happen on an Indian model, has to actually come out of innovation and startups. That's where the action really lies. And everything that has happened in AI also, which is now sort of taken over by big tech, originally started as a startup, as we are all aware. So I think that's why we want to place a lot of bets on that. So I think this year, this calendar year is going to be the year where a lot of these initiatives under the India AI mission, you will see the maturation process and you will see them actually in full-blown action.
Well, let me end by asking you, since we're talking about reimagining the future and reimagining India's future in the context of AI and generative AI in specific, this debate about 70 hours and 90 hours and what is good enough and what is not enough and how much more we should be doing or how much less we should be doing. How do you reimagine functioning of the government itself in this context of output and input?
See, quite honestly, I mean, this is my personal view. I don't mean it as a government view. I think governments need to get fundamentally become, when you're talking about you have to throw up or throw out the colonial hangover of various things. I think the first thing that governments need to do is they need to get less hierarchical and fewer layers. I mean, they need to be flatter structures simply because we need to make sure that, the number of decision-making levels shrink. My own experience with administration and what I've read about, the way that many of the rule books are written, it's fundamentally, you had one European right at the top of the system, and so he just figured that it's a good option to have 6 or 7 layers which look at something before it comes to him. And so the Indians are wonderful; they'll fight with each other, and then finally you'll get an output which is something which is safe for him to sign off on. But I think we need to move from that system which is essentially based on distrust to one which is based on trust, and therefore you need flatter organizations. But having said that we need flatter organizations, we also need to be conscious in the Indian context that we have probably some of the biggest disparities in terms of educational levels and attainment in the country. And, we are a democratic country, and the structure of government, not just in terms of elected representatives, but the structure of government also needs to represent all stratas and everybody in the system. So we have to balance these two interests and create a structure which really works. And there, I think technology can play a big role in actually enhancing productivity and enhancing the capabilities of many people and enable us to create this flatter structure. And that means that, you have fewer people looking at the same thing, but the more people looking at a wider cross-section of issues that government needs to really control, and we'd probably perform better.
So creating a more equitable India as well and leveraging the power of technology, Mahesh, how significant is that going to be as we talk about the future?
I think going back to some of the focus areas, sir, which you talked about, I think we discussed a lot about the compute, data, models, apps. I think bringing it all together as well is huge, right? So think about what happened with the entire payments UPI. There was Beam, which was the app. There was UPI, which was the rails. There was the data powering it. And then there was that innovation ecosystem around it. So in those sectors which you mentioned, trying to bring it all together where, you can actually have maybe a reference app created by the government because there's nobody better to prime the pump, so to speak, right? To get consumers to use it. Yeah. It could be, an app, an app, for example, in a local language in a village somewhere in West Bengal where you're trying to do tutoring. So you have the model, which is built over there. You have the app, which is accessible to people in vernacular, powered by a vernacular model, sitting on a GPU, which is provided. And I think that will be really fantastic. I think that's where the real change starts to happen.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck. As you self pointed out, the 2025 is going to be in many ways a breakout year, one of the most exciting years as far as the India AI mission is concerned. We look forward to hearing much more from you in terms of what finally is achieved through the course of the year. But thank you so much for joining us and sketching out what the road ahead looks like and giving us insights into what the priorities are for the government. Mahesh, thank you very, very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for S. Krishnan and Mahesh for joining us here this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Shireen. Could I request all of you to come together for a group picture, and then I'll request Shireen to offer a small token of appreciation to our lovely guests, please. And could we have a louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we thank our distinguished guests for the insightful data information that we just heard from them. Thank you, sir, once again for taking out time and joining us. Thank you to Mahesh as well, and thank you, Shireen, for moderating that conversation for us. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of what we had in plan and store for you as far as today's evening is concerned. I do want to take this opportunity once again to thank all our lovely speakers, our panelists, but most importantly, all of you for being such a lovely audience, such a patient audience, such an interactive audience, because it's people like you who really make this event. I hope we are all leaving the room with a much deeper understanding about the future of AI in India, most importantly, where we stand and where we stand on the global landscape as well. So once again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each one of you. Could we have a huge round of applause as we wrap this evening, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much. Do join us for an evening of cocktails and dinner, most importantly, networking as well. This is your host, Ridhima Bhatnagar, signing off. Thank you once again.